Good afternoon. I'd like to call the September 16th, 2014 City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco. Hart. Here. Hotchkiss. Here. Murillo.
Here.
Rouse.
Here.
White. Here. Mayor Schneider.
Here. Item 1.
Item 1, proclamation declaring September 2014 as Adult Literacy Awareness Month.
Whereas the need for a literate citizenry is undeniably essential for social, economic, and personal growth. I'm including the whereases, it seems more official for adult literacy. And whereas Victor Hugo wrote, "To learn to read is to light a fire." And whereas Ernest Hemingway wrote, "There is no friend as loyal as a book." And whereas Kofi Annan said, "Literacy is a bridge from misery to hope." And whereas Stephen King said, "Books are a uniquely portable magic." And whereas Frederick Douglass proclaimed, "Once you learn to read, you will be forever free." And whereas Thomas Jefferson proclaimed, "I cannot live without books." And whereas Walt Disney said, "There is more treasure in books than in all the pirates' loot on Treasure Island." And whereas 18% of adults in Santa Barbara County lack basic prose literary skills, and whereas the year 2014 marks the 30th anniversary of California Library Literacy, bad pun there, bad. And whereas the Santa Barbara Public Library System through California Library Literacy Services offers free one-on-one tutoring for adults living and working in the library district. Now therefore, I, Helene Schneider, Mayor of Santa Barbara, on behalf of the Santa Barbara City Council, hereby proclaim September 2014 as Adult Literacy Awareness Month and urge my fellow residents to join me in appreciating the importance of literacy. And thank you for your work each and every day working on this. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. If you'd like to say a few words.
My name is Anthony Valdez. I work for the city, the street department, asphalt crew. I'd like to start off with thanking Rick Fulmer, James Russell, my lead, Frank Gomez, for letting me do the literacy program. It's helped me out wonderfully. I've looked into a bunch of programs to help me out in reading comprehension, and there was a lot out there, but I decided to go to the Santa Barbara Library. I got to tell you, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I can go on for a long time, letting you know what I learned, not only reading comprehension, but so much more in that program. It really did help. I mean, like I said, I can go on for a long time about the program. It was awesome.
Great.
So thank you guys for the program.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anthony. And I'm going to just take 1 minute.
You can introduce yourself, too.
And I'm Bev Schwartzberg, and I'm the coordinator of the Adult Literacy Program for the Library Services. And on behalf of the 32,000 people, adults with low literacy skills in our library district, I really want to thank City Council for your ongoing support of our library program. We are here today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of California Library Literacy Services, and you are joining Governor Brown, who last week declared statewide September as Adult Literacy Awareness Month. And you're also joining the County of Santa Barbara and the cities of Solvang and Carpinteria, and as of about 15 minutes ago at the Goleta City Council meeting, the city of Goleta, in declaring September as Adult Literacy Awareness Month. We wanted to let you know about the hard work of library volunteers who over the last decades have offered so many thousands of hours of service. Library volunteers offered 8,000 hours of service in adult literacy services last year, and I don't know if you know the value of an hour of tutoring, but that's really hundreds of thousands of dollars of volunteer time that they give really out of their own skills and their brains, and most importantly, their hearts, to make our community better. And Anthony just told us one way that a city employee benefited from the program. Literacy skills and literacy challenges are often invisible in people's lives, but they do hold them back. And we just want to thank Council for recognizing that adult literacy issues occur in our community and that the library provides free services and has done so for many years to help people in our community. I just wanted to hold up for the camera. Is this going to show?
Yep.
This is Steve Tafoya from the Sacramento Public Library, but part of a statewide campaign, and you will be seeing more this year from California Library Literacy Services. A wonderful new film came out at libraryliteracy.org telling his story and the story of other adult learners throughout California and how libraries transform their lives. So this is a very big year for the library and for literacy services. It's a very, very big year, and I just want to thank Council for your recognition.
Great. Thank you very much.
And I'd also like to thank Jane, my tutor that was here. She helped me out a lot, so a lot goes out to her too.
Great.
And I appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you guys again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, there aren't, Madam Mayor.
Okay, public comment. I have a few speaker slips here. We'll start with Clint Orr and be followed by Thomas Welch.
Mayor Schneider, council members, Clint Orr here, of course. I hope you've read my offer to lease 521 Firestone in the airport property, of course, the vacant Elephant Bar. And I hope you understand the need for habitat for your children and for ourselves to provide couples dance free of charge on a nightly basis. Ex-Mayor Hal Conklin recently said that Santa Barbara is the arts capital of the world and should remain so. Well, the art of couples and social dance, which our founding father, George Washington's forte, it flat out doesn't exist in this county. Where would you go dancing tonight? You wouldn't. Couples dancing doesn't exist. Economically, the airport honky-tonk will drive hotel visits from other counties and states. It'll drive airport revenues, people landing their jets and coming in, possibly cowboy rock stars even. And it'll also drive the Amtrak from San Diego, Orange, and L.A. counties. A chain restaurant, people aren't going to come up from San Diego for a taco. I don't see it coming. I'm ready to close the situation October 9th, given the opportunity. I urge you all to do the right thing economically and socially to approve a community dance hall live music venue on that location. How do we put this into a position where you say yes or no? Is there, we got to get on an agenda in a couple of weeks, or what is the next process? How do we go from me talking at you to you making a decision? What is the best thing to do next?
I think there's a bid process through the airport department, so we can connect with Director Johns about that. But I don't know the details off the top of my head of where we are with that lease agreement.
All I know is that the seven of you have the final say. They are advisors to you, but they don't make the decisions. The brokers don't make the decision. The airport authority doesn't make the decision. You, as the city council, you make the final decision, from my understanding.
Right. You need to wind up, please.
So, okay, I'll talk to the airport authority and the city clerk, the gal here. So,
go ahead.
Okay,
Maria.
I'll go ahead and continue.
Mr. Orr, as someone who enjoys couples dancing, I'm happy to have a meeting with you, and just to clarify for you the process.
Okay.
Will you make an appointment with Debbie Bush, please?
I sure will. That
Okay.
would be awesome. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thomas Welch, and I see Mike Woods here. You're waiving your time, so you'll have up to 4 minutes, and then Lloyd Armand.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Thomas Welch. I am the chairperson for the TAP unit and on the executive board of Local 620. I'm just here again to give an update on our impasse negotiations. Our mediation last week's been postponed till this week. We're still kind of working on this process, and I just wanted to come up here and address some inaccuracies that I've been reading in the local media. Namely with the employee contribution towards our pension. I've been a city employee for almost 9 years now, and I have contributed towards my pension this entire time. The miscellaneous pension, which is 90% of our bargaining unit, our members have been paying the majority, if not the entirety of their employee contribution for that entire period. We actually have a cost-sharing program with the city, and we're paying over our employee contribution. We're paying a portion of the employer contribution as well for that. I just wanted to. Don't ever read that in the news press or the News Hawk or any of the other local media sites. So wanted to make sure that got read out there. And I also wanted to clarify one of the statements I made last week with regards to making sure we have people living in town. It's, in my opinion, having people living out of town is a liability to the city. In my department, in the Water Resources Department, we have people who perform standby services. They respond to water main breaks, sewer overflows, issues at both treatment plants, both Cater for water treatment and El Estero and wastewater treatment. And having people out of town increases our response time to emergencies. We do have some people living in town, but as costs increase, people are going to be priced out of this area. And having a few people in town does help, but they're not able to respond to all the emergencies. And one person can't respond to an emergency. It takes multiple people to run a Vector truck, especially in the middle of the night. It takes several people to dig up a water main to get that fixed. And then the water department's also really critical in helping our firefighters with the ever-present danger in our foothills with the wildfires that. We are, I don't know if we're still under a red flag warning. I did get a text last night with that. So I just wanted to clarify that statement yesterday. I don't think it's a nice to have to live in town. I think it's a responsibility for the city to have people who can respond to these emergencies. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Lloyd Deramond, and then Phil Walker, and the final speaker will be Nancy Tunnell.
Hello, my name is Lloyd DeArmond. I wanted to come here as a representative of the Peace Day Santa Barbara group. We are having our 5th annual celebration of the International Day of Peace this Sunday up at City College at the BC Communications Department. It'll be from 4:30 to 6 p.m. and I wanted to invite the City Council, if they're at all available, to come and celebrate this Day of Peace. I'd like to thank the mayor, who has been coming every year to read a proclamation for us, and Kathy Murillo, who also has been showing up every year to show her support. And I have some flyers, if any of you would like one, as a reminder, and hope to see you this Sunday up at City College. Thank you.
Take it that's open to the public, too, not just
Yes, it
us.
is.
There we go. Phil Walker?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. Within the last few weeks, the traffic calming and/or pedestrian refuge islands have peppered the area, the neighborhood area at Voluntario, Soledad, Mason and Soledad, Mason and Voluntario, and a dual unit at Soledad and Carpinteria, because they do have a stop sign at Voluntario and Carpinteria Street. It's interesting there. The concept is sort of not what I anticipated it to be. You know, it would have been much cheaper, much easier to just stripe it out, somewhat triangle that just didn't quite get there, but I certainly would not consider them a pedestrian refuge. Already at Voluntario and 500, a gentleman who was carrying a bag of recyclable material on a bicycle got hit. Thank God it was just a minor incident. But it slows down traffic going into it, but people tend to, pardon the French, I see the expressions on the faces a lot because I live right there. They tend to get pissed off. And I saw one gentleman, he was good. He was like a race car driver. He had a hopped up BMW, and he utilized it as a chicane, you know. And about the time he hit my driveway, he was punched it and he was moving. But then you got Alisos and 500 where they've had a lot of accidents down there. So, again, the rule of unintended consequences. You hope to solve one problem, and somehow you get more problems. And that's what I see happening with a lot of expense, a lot of money spent. And I don't feel safer, but some people say it is slowing down the traffic going into the intersection. I was walking up here 2 blocks down, and what about a speed limit on the sidewalks for bicycles? People are going to continue to do it, and I think in L.A. they do allow bicycle riding on the sidewalks.
Thank
so
you.
how about a speed limit? Thank you.
Nancy Tunnell?
So you got yourself a hot new developer to rework the funk zone and take it away from the people who actually made it the funk zone. The Independent says of him, he's all about the greenest building technology possible, getting people out of their cars and redefining the American dream to include something other than the single-family home with a two-car garage. Smaller units, he says, can be sexy, sustainable, and affordable. Well, he didn't come up with this. This is Agenda 21. This is Zickley. This is our world government overlords planning and controlling our cities and our lives. These guys are popping up everywhere. Students of the new urbanism, a polite term for driving people into dense, compact cities while the elite pull in all the land and its resources and, of course, taking away their cars. Gino Van Bagen, head of ICLEI Global, proudly states that we must take the streets back from the cars. They're selling the notion of a bike heaven, that American cities should use the Netherlands as a model. Well, the Netherlands has been a very, very compact area for hundreds and hundreds of years. Besides, it's minuscule. It's flat, and it's cut up with waterways. It bears no resemblance to the United States or Santa Barbara. If you take cars out of downtown and then eliminate street parking, you will eliminate a big chunk of the middle class. Workers living downtown will be those employed by the ever-diminishing and upscaling retail stores and restaurants, and those who service the rich, who conveniently can afford housing that provides parking. But I guess you don't think it's your job to worry about how all those other people are going to get to work. It's your job to help the globalists create their vision of sustainability, which is the deindustrialization of first world countries and the destruction and disempowerment of the middle class, while they reconstitute in the greener pastures of China and beyond. And I still believe that you guys don't deserve to pledge allegiance to that flag unless it's Mr. Hotchkiss. He has actually shown some belief in a democratic system. Thank you.
That concludes public comment. We'll move on to the consent calendar, and you have some items to read.
Item 2, adoption of ordinance for airline terminal solar photovoltaic power purchase agreement at 500 Fowler Road, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute a power purchase agreement with Sun Edison to develop, own, operate, and maintain a solar photovoltaic generating system at the airport and sell all power generated to the airport. Item 3, adoption of ordinance for the assignment and grant of easements to the County Flood Control District, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving the assignment of existing city easement interests on private properties and the granting of easements on city-owned properties to the County of Santa Barbara Flood Control and Water Conservation District for flood control and all related purposes, and authorizing the city administrator to execute as necessary the assignment and grant deeds in a form approved by the city attorney. And item 4, introduction of ordinance authorizing approval of Clean Water State Revolving Fund installment sale agreement for air process improvement project, recommending that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the approval and execution by the Public Works Director of an installment sale agreement in connection with the air process improvement project Clean Water State Revolving Fund project number 7857110.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. Ms. Murillo had wanted to bring up item 4 with a question. Any other items to bring up?
Item number 10.
And 10?
7.
And 7. Okay. So item 4 was just read. It's the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The project is at a cost of $20 million, which seemed like tipped a threshold for me to let the public know what we're doing to our wastewater treatment plant. And the drought has got people thinking about where our water comes from, and it occurred to me that people flush their toilet and they don't sometimes think, well, where does it go? And here we are making a serious upgrade to the plant. And I'm not sure if you have time to explain that you're changing it from a high-rate activate sludge treatment system to a step feed biological nutrient removal system, but it's terribly interesting to me. And if you could just give us a brief description so the public knows. And it's a complicated financing structure, and I would really appreciate hearing a few words from you, Mr. Toth.
Well, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, and council members, thank you for the opportunity. As you know, this has been a project that has been in the works for a number of years. We hired a consultant around 2010 to do some study work associated with updating our secondary treatment process at the El Estero Wastewater Treatment Plant. That's taken a year or so, and then we've come back to the City Council with contracts for preliminary design, and then most recently to start final design. And in that process, we've come back to the City Council several times for your authorization for resolutions associated with obtaining State Water Resources Control Board SRF loan financing. And of course, you know, we in the city staff, we appreciate all the support we've been given by the mayor and city council over this time. So the El Estero Clean Water program was, the treatment plant was reconfigured in the mid-'70s to become a full activated sludge treatment plant. And what that basically means is that we use aerobic bacteria in a big tank that we pump a bunch of air into, and those bacteria further clean contaminants as well as other bad bacteria, so that the resulting water coming out of those tanks is very, very clean. And that process has been in place and has worked successfully for 40 years, but the equipment associated with that process is in need of replacement. And that's basically what this project is about. The heartbeat or the center of the treatment process at El Estero is that activated sludge aeration basin process. And so it's an expensive overhaul of the treatment plant in that regard, but it's well worth it, and it's something that's just been due, you know, now since we've had such good use of that plant for the last 40 years.
Thank you.
And you don't need to vote on that separately?
No.
No, okay. Thank you very much.
Question,
Yeah, sure, Mr. Hotchkiss.
Is this not also an update in technology or methods? I mean, it really is quite different.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, it is an update of technology in that the air blowers that are going to be used are much superior to the old ones. They're higher tech. They use less energy. They're more sophisticated controls. The aeration stones that will be used within the tanks themselves to feed air into the tanks are much better, and converting oxygen and getting the oxygen dissolved into the tank water to assist the bacteria that are eating the contaminants. So the improvements are significant in terms of technology, but in terms of the process, it's a tried and true process that has been in place for over 50 years. And so we feel very comfortable about spending this amount of money to do this. We're very confident that we're going to get good positive results out of this update.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Item 7, if you could read that.
Contract for development of wastewater collection system strategic management program, Phase 5.
Thank you. Ms. Toth, you may need to come back, I have a feeling. Was it Mr. Hart? Did you? No, it was Mr. White.
Thank you. One of the points made in this staff report was that the sewer mains range in size from 6 to 42 inches, and we've heard that it's the 6-inch mains that have been the most problematic with as far as SSOs. Can you describe what portion of our lines are 6-inch lines? Do we have a sense of?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, our 6-inch diameter pipes really form the vast amount of the pipes within our collection system. 6-inch pipes by themselves are approximately 50% or half of our entire wastewater collection system, and 6 and 8-inch diameter pipes by themselves approximate 3/4 of our entire wastewater collection system. So once you get above 6 and 8-inch pipes, you're only talking about 25% or less, And really, the large diameter pipes, those that are 24 inches and above, are really only a few miles of our collection system. Again, our collection system is approximately 257 miles. So half of that is 6-inch diameter pipe, and another quarter is 8-inch diameter pipe. And so we're focusing now on better maintenance and more updated technology to investigate 6-inch diameter pipe, especially. This year, that has been the major source of our SSOs. We've had, unfortunately, 16 SSOs this calendar year to date. They've been all very small volume spills, thankfully, and they've all been pipes that we maintain less frequently. They're pipes that we clean only once every few years because they haven't been problems in the past. So that's where our frontier is for reducing sewer spills, is a focus on 6-inch diameter pipe maintenance.
And in today's world, would we be building 6-inch lines for those situations, or is this as with water mains, we've gone from 4-inch mains to 6 and 8-inch mains over the decades, just as standard procedure. Is there a change that's occurred in sanitation technology that way, or codes?
I've heard it both ways from experts. Some people argue that the standard should be 8-inch diameter pipe and we shouldn't use 6-inch diameter pipe anymore. However, as we've just said, half of our system is 6-inch diameter pipe. And to replace a 6-inch diameter pipe rather than rehabilitate it costs 4 to 5 times as much money. And so that's one of the major factors. Also, just the fact that we're getting so good with water conservation has led us to a point where hydraulically, except in extreme wet weather flows, we just don't have as much wastewater as traditionally people have had in the past. And so that's another argument for 6-inch diameter pipe. Finally, the fact is we've got the topography of Santa Barbara where a lot of flow comes down, and when you get a lot of in instances where you have wet weather flows or larger flows coming down, the smaller diameter pipes in those instances actually acts as a shock absorber. It slows the travel of the pipe to get down to the wastewater treatment plant. If we put in bigger pipes everywhere, then everything would just come at the treatment plant all at once, and we'd be dealing with that. So it kind of slows the travel of the wastewater to the plant.
Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You said, I think you used the word rehabilitate. Are we actually cleaning out these pipes? We're not replacing them.
We're, Mr. Hotchkiss, we're cleaning them, and then we have contractors that come in and line the pipes. And our primary way of lining the pipes is by using a fiberglass liner. And you can see them occasionally. I saw one on the street today that was lining a pipe. They kind of cone off a manhole area, and they put a liner in the pipe, and some inflate it in the pipe with hot water, some inflate it with air. But then it slightly reduces the diameter of the pipe by about 1/2 inch. So it might be a 5.5-inch diameter pipe, but it's pretty close to 6 inches. And it's renewed, and it's good for then up to 50 plus years. And that costs 1/4 what it would cost to replace the pipe, dig it out, and then put a new, larger pipe in its place. And it's much more convenient in terms of traffic obstructions. I mean, if you trench a block at a time and you've got that trench open for probably a couple weeks, and then everyone on that block is going to be unhappy for a long, long time when you replace the pipe.
And you can do that same block in?
A day.
A day. Great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then item number 10, if you could read that.
City Arts Advisory Committee and Community Events and Festivals Committee funding recommendations and contract with the Santa Barbara County Arts Commission for fiscal year 2015.
Great. That was Mr. Hart.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight and thank the members of the Arts Advisory Committee and the Events and Festivals Committee for all the hard work that they do reviewing these grant applications. You know, this funding source is pretty unique for municipalities to have investment in quality of life through cultural activities, and I think it speaks well to our community and to those organizations and to the people who worked really hard to come up with these great recommendations. So I want to say thank you and appreciate them for their work.
And actually, I meant to bring the catalog with me. It just hit the people's mailboxes last week. For the first time, the Center for Performing Arts, aka the Granada, the Lobero, and the New Vic, have partnered together to put all of their programming into one catalog, and they're sharing ticketing, and and you can have a calendar of every great thing that's going on throughout the season at all 3 locations, and it's a cost savings for them in marketing, and it helps the community so figure out their calendaring, and so that just hit people's mailboxes, and it's just out in the community. I meant to bring a copy to bring up here, and I know that was commented in some of the in the pieces for the grants here in terms of how the different arts communities are trying to collaborate a little more, and it's, I think, working very well. So I appreciate you bringing this item up. Mr. White, you had your light on. Did you have something? Okay. Okay, so those are all the comments. I don't believe we need to vote on anything separately, so is there a motion for the consent calendar?
There is, Madam Mayor.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. And then report from the Finance Committee, Mr. Francisco.
Madam Mayor, the Finance Committee met today and heard recommendations which we have forwarded to the full council for next week concerning raising the contracting authority for the city administrator and another budget item that I didn't totally understand, but very similar.
Okay. All right. Item number 13.
Stage 2 drought update.
All right. Mr. Hagmark, hello again. Good to see you. There's a hurricane down south. We want it. I know. It's not coming up here.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Joshua Hagmark. I'm the Acting Water Resources Manager. Here today to give another Stage 2 drought update. I have with me today Kelly Dyer, our Water Resources Supervisor, who oversees supply, and Madeline Ward, our Conservation Coordinator, to help out with the presentation today. I have a lot of items to go over today. I apologize for the length, but I have received quite a few questions from the council, and they're just trying to answer as many as I can in the presentation today. But of course, if I miss something, please stop me. I'd be happy to go back. But we'll be talking, of course, about water supply outlook, where we are with our supplemental water purchases, how we take delivery of those supplemental water purchases through the Central Coast Water Authority, our drought response capital projects, where we are with water conservation efforts, and tools for influencing water usage. So I'm going to spend a little more time this go-around talking about our current supply strategy. It is our roadmap for how we have been approaching this drought and how we are dealing with the variable conditions that exist. And just kind of want to walk through the different elements of this graphic here. We are currently in year 3. That's water year 3, which is 2014. This is the last month of this water year. And then we will start water year 4. As you can see, we have a very diverse portfolio of water. Extraordinary conservation being our cheapest source of water in a drought to help combat the drought. We can't end the drought with our conservation efforts, but we certainly can do a lot to extend our other water supplies. In year 3, we also have supplemental water, which we have imported this year to help meet our demands. We have groundwater, which we are ramping up the usage of. We'll be using a lot more groundwater next year. The state water, as you know, the state water for this year was reduced to 5%, and we have this often confusing. This state water that shows up on here is water that we had banked outside of the area and had delivered and used this year. So it was state water from prior years that we had been kind of storing up exactly for the lack of rainy day, and delivered and utilized this year. We have water in Gibraltar and Mission Tunnel that we're utilizing, and we anticipate by December, if we don't receive any significant rainfall and runoff, Gibraltar will be empty. And so when you look out in future years, the inflow coming in is actually just Mission Tunnel, water coming in from Mission Tunnel. Kachuma carryover water, this is water from prior years that we have not utilized our full allocation and have kind of stored up as kind of a bank, and that's how we are planning to spread it out and deliver it to help meet our needs. And then, of course, Looking at year 4, the dwindling supply in Kachuma, we are taking a 55% reduction, and I will talk about that a little further into our presentation. I think it's also important to know as part of our supply strategy, this assumes no reservoir inflow and no additional state water. We will be pursuing additional purchases, but we aren't anticipating any state water allocations going forward as part of this plan. So I'm very pleased to report to the community that our conservation efforts for August were 25% reduction from normalized use, and that is a huge step forward. Whatever people are doing, keep doing it. We're headed in the right direction. We need to see those kind of conservations, particularly in the warmer months when a lot of outdoor discretionary water use is occurring. It's going to become more difficult as we move into the winter months, and it becomes that reduction is going to need to come from indoor water usage. I am pulling together some numbers and hope to report back, but we've seen some significant drop-off in water coming into the wastewater treatment plant, which indicates indoor water usage. So anyway, to kind of back up and look at the map or the graphic here, the dotted green line is our normalized water usage. That's what we would anticipate to see in a normalized year. We have the actual water usage, the red bar, which is showing the 20% and 25% reduction. We have the drought target, which is the 20% overall target that we're looking for the year. And we also have the water year 2013. And now water year 2013, as you recall, was the driest year on record. So that's why we put it on here for kind of some level of comparison. But our conservation efforts that we're looking for are 20% below normalized usage. Kind of wanted to look at who was saving water. I thought this would be a helpful discussion. Now, this is for the month of July. And what we saw was basically every category of water user was conserving, and I think doing a significant portion of saving in all areas. What we would expect to see, though, is single-family residential, recycled water, irrigation customers doing the bulk of the conservation, and that's where we saw that. That's outdoor discretionary water usage. And so we saw an average, probably in there, about 30% reduction from that category alone. The multifamily residential and commercial industrial, a little more hardened water use, not a lot of outdoor, discretionary water. And there we saw an 18%, which was very impressive from that category. That includes restaurants and businesses, and that was a very impressive number. And then I do want to talk a little bit about agriculture. 11%, I took that's an impressive number. Again, ag does not make up a significant amount of water in this community, but the way water is allocated to agriculture is based on weather and the crop that they're actually growing. So to see 11% reduction is pretty impressive, because that does mean a drop in yields if they go too far with that. And so overall, a great picture that this community in all categories is pulling their weight, and very pleased if this can continue. So where are we with total water savings? We've been reporting since June now on water savings. And as you can see, in August, we saved just shy of 400 acre-feet. We are about 300 acre-feet shy of our 1,200 acre-foot goal for the end of this water year. And I think it's very feasible in September that we can achieve that goal. Certainly this warm spell is not helping. But I think if we can hit the 20 to 25% goal, we certainly can achieve that for this water year. Now, there has been a lot of questions about what the status of Lake Kachuma is, so I just wanted to take and spend a little time on that. There is currently 62,300 acre-feet of storage remaining in Kachuma. Its overall capacity, when full, is 200,000 acre-feet. We did not have solid numbers for the amount of project water. The county is currently working on this and anticipates publishing something in early October, but it's somewhere between 25 and 30,000 acre-feet is currently available to the project participants. And I'll spend a little time on that. The project participants being the member units such as Montecito, Carpinteria, City of Santa Barbara, Goleta, and San Ynez. We are all part of the participants of the Kachuma project, and that is the available water we anticipate as of October 1st. For next year, we anticipate bringing in about 6,000 acre-feet for the city in water year 15. We have some carryover of 1,975 acre-feet that we plan on bringing. We have the 3,725 acre-feet, which is our entitlement of Kachuma water. That's a 55% reduction from normal. And again, that was mutually agreed upon reduction by all the member units that we would take to make sure that Kachuma could continue to provide water past this water year. I'll talk about that in next slide. And then there's 300 acre-feet in which Montecito Water District, we have an ongoing agreement with them that they do in exchange. So as I mentioned, all the member units are taking a 55% reduction in their water usage for water year 15. Now there has to be mutual agreement if we want to change that. So should this year become, we receive significant inflow, we've all agreed that we would want to revisit this and take a look at that because the reduction is pretty steep. The strategy here is to try, Kachuma plays an interesting role in our state water deliveries. We need water in Kachuma in order to convey it through and into the South Coast Tecolote Tunnel to move it to the South Coast. And so part of maintaining some water in Kachuma is so we can continue to purchase water and import water. Also, we want to maximize our opportunity at one more water year, one more winter of rainfall in the hopes of getting some inflow into the reservoir. Like I reported last time, there is at 30,000 acre-feet of capacity in Kachuma, there is the ability, according to our biological opinion, that we could reduce the amount of fish releases. Currently, it's about 10 acre-feet a day that is released for fish, and the biological opinion leaves it open that it could be reduced down to 1 acre-foot. That discussion is occurring. We are not allowed to be at the table during that discussion, but the Bureau and National Marine Fisheries are actually in consultation right now on what, if any, reduction we can get that down to extend the life of the reservoir. Now, there is a release going on currently. It started on August 18th and is anticipated to go through August 31st. The upside to that release, that is water that does belong to the downstream users. They're releasing about 4,500 acre-feet of water. And when that release is occurring, we do not have to release project water for the fish because that water also satisfies the fish need. So for the time being, which will add up to at least 60 days, there's some significant 600 acre-feet of water saved by the downstream users doing this release. So there also was some questions about how the delivery process works through the Central Coast Water Authority. The city's Table A, and I apologize for the acronyms in here, the Table A is our contract with the state water contract is for 3,000 acre-feet of water per year. And in a normal year, that's what our allocation would be. We're supposed to get those requests in by October 1st. CCWA is kind of lagging a couple weeks behind, but we're putting that request together to them, and they'll be basically looking at what other communities' requests are. Some may not have the water to fill their allotment in the pipeline, and if they can't fulfill it, then that extra capacity becomes available to the other users. By December 15th, the goal is to kind of figure out what that reserve capacity is and who's interested in that reserve capacity. So we will be moving forward to request at least our 3,000 acre-foot capacity, and also we'll be showing an interest in any unused capacity. We have budgeted sufficient funds for this year to include more than 3,000 acre-feet of capacity should we be able to find additional supplemental water to deliver. Again, if there's any unused capacity going forward and we do find water, we can certainly request to use that. So for this next year on our supply charts, we show 1,900 acre-feet of required supplemental water. We currently have that water. It's in San Luis Reservoir, and it will be delivered over the next couple months and into the new year. What I'm showing is secured right now is water that we've purchased from Vandenberg Air Force Base. It resides in San Luis Reservoir. We have purchased 535 acre-feet from the Mojave Water Agency, which sits in San Luis Reservoir. And Biggs West Gridley was a purchase of water from rice farmers in Northern California. That water is being delivered as part of a larger movement of water that started in July and will end in September. I put a little asterisk by it because the actual final quantity is unknown. We assumed a 35% loss of water. We purchased actually 2,000 acre-feet, and there are normally losses when you move water through the delta associated with environmental concerns up there. And we assumed a 35% carriage loss. That doesn't get established or published until probably November by the Department of Water Resources. So at this point, I have no reason to believe we won't see most of that. So I'm showing that as secured at this point. I think we'll know shortly what that looks like, but I haven't heard any negative feedback that they've had to turn off the pumps, and we certainly would not be seeing a portion of that. Then under the unsecured, I kind of want to take a little time to talk about this. It's been a while since we went into detail, but the city is participating in a groundwater banking program. It's in Kern County called Dudley Ridge. We have stored water there, and in essence, it belongs to the city. It's just a matter of scheduling its delivery and the cost of that delivery. Certainly, there's a lot of people trying to move water around and to get water out of that bank. Because we had already had so much water already lined up to be delivered in San Luis Reservoir, I didn't push hard to get it delivered this year, but in water year 15, we certainly will be looking to try and get the remainder of that 1,400 acre-feet that we own there delivered. That brings us up to a total.
This is a long presentation, so I want to ask a question now here. How much of this loss is due to evaporation? Do we know? The 35% you mentioned before?
The 35% carriage loss that the Department of Water Resources refers to is related to mitigation for moving water through the delta, and it has to do with saltwater intrusion. It has to do with fish in the delta. Sometimes they have to throttle the pumps back, and so they can't move 100% of the water through the delta, and so that's what that. It's not really an evaporative loss necessarily.
I see.
It's more of an environmental mitigation.
When we get to something where you could express what evaporation really costs us, could you let me know? You know what percent? How we figure that out?
Okay.
Don't stop now.
Okay. So total supplemental water at this point that I feel we've kind of got our hands around is around 4,400 acre-feet. So what our current philosophy is to maximize the available capacity in calendar year 14. We have, or will have delivered by December, 3,759 acre-feet of water, which is well beyond our normal year capacity in the pipeline. So we've taken up extra capacity to deliver more water. We will have 1,900 acre-feet of water remaining to be delivered in calendar year 15. And I do apologize, but there's all these different, there's the water year calendar, there's the fiscal year calendar, and then there's the regular calendar. The 1,900 acre-feet we will have in San Luis. Now, that does not include the Dudley Ridge water, but that's how much water we will have remaining to be delivered in calendar year 15. We anticipate having 3,300 acre-feet of capacity in the pipeline. And we have, like I mentioned, budgeted to deliver up to 4,500 acre-feet if we can get additional capacity and we can find additional water to deliver. We're certainly looking to see what's out there. The water market right now is very quiet. It typically is this time of year, but it will start to pick up in the next couple months. The major chunks of water start to move around once they start to know what the rainfall totals start to look like. It's kind of like last year. It was a frenzy February, March, April, May, and then June it started to quiet down as far as water available for sale. So according to our current supply strategy, we are looking for 4,420 acre feet from now through year 6. Now, it's conservative. At this point, I feel like we've got a good handle on that volume of water. Certainly, if I can find additional water, it provides us additional breathing room. There are certain capacity limitations with how much we can import. But if we can buy additional water, should we have issues with meeting our conservation goals, should we have issues with our wells, it could provide us that safety, comfort level moving forward as we continue to adaptively manage the drought. Now at this time I'm going to jump into our capital projects. We've the tertiary treatment plant is currently in construction and is anticipated to be online by the summer of 2015. Along with that, we continue to work on the Valverde well. This is a non-potable well. We have been looking to get online to help with the recycled water system to reduce potable water demand. And to prove we're moving on the tertiary project, I'm going to continue to bring you monthly pictures to show that construction, at this point, we're pretty much out of the ground, which is probably the most risky part of construction. And the filters have been ordered. And so, as you may recall, we do have an incentive clause in this contract to encourage the contractor to finish early. And should there is a financial incentive for that. Groundwater project highlights, Alameda well replacement. As you may recall, that well failed, and we are currently in design for replacement of that well in Alameda Park, and it's scheduled to be online in the summer of 2015. High school well, we've done some water quality testing on it, and it appears that we're going to need to pipe that to the Ortega groundwater treatment plant if we intend to use that as a long-term source for the drought. And so we are working on a pipeline design right now, and we have budgeted money it's about $750,000 to run the additional piping down to tie into the Ortega groundwater treatment plant. The Veracruz well, as you may recall from last month, we had an electric failure. We did an emergency purchase order. That equipment has arrived, and staff are installing that now, and we anticipate to be operational there by October. And the City Hall well, as you've been inconvenienced by that, lots of equipment out there, that well is actually under warranty, and the contractor is out under their own cost, trying to get to the bottom of the well and retrieve the motor and pump which failed, pull it out, and we have already purchased additional pump to go back down there so we can get that operational hopefully as soon as possible. We're hoping by October. So as I plan to go into great detail next week on desal, I'm just going to quickly move through this. We are currently in the pre-design phase. We are currently preparing for award of a contract for design build in April of 2015. That would put the facility online in the summer of 2016 in the hopes of meeting the critical demand in 2017. Now, what this graphic does show, and I want to clarify, is this shows a facility of 7,500 acre feet, but we are going to do this in phases. The initial award will be for a much smaller facility, and should the drought continue and conditions remain, we will be prepared to expand that facility if necessary. The elements that we have kind of left there are module elements, treatment trains is what they're called, that can expand the size of the facility up to the 7,500 acre feet.
A question. It's based on no reservoir inflow, so does that mean zero rain from today forward? Or is it if it rained a little, a lot, average rain, how does that change at all?
So Madam Mayor, what's challenging about this is we could receive rain but not receive any inflow. What we really need is the inflow to make a difference here. We can receive 5 or 6 inches. It depends on how it falls. If it's just a steady rain, The watershed right now is extremely dry. The county is saying 13 inches of rain to start to see any runoff. Now, again, that's all prefaced with how that rainfall comes in, but basically what we're really focused, it doesn't mean no rain, it just means we need to see inflow. We're assuming no significant inflow. Last year, we received no significant inflow into Kachuma.
And so if we had a typical average rain year, we would still have an issue with the drought because we are so far behind in terms. Is that an accurate statement?
That is accurate. We would be really challenged. Even in a normal year, we would see some inflow, but I don't know that it will be. That's a part of the adaptive management we will have to see, and hopefully it will be enough to delay the desal decision. But it's going to be. We're going to have to be checking it monthly and seeing what that means because I don't think a normal year is going to delay it, but I certainly hope it does.
Okay. Did you want to add anything? No. You're good. Okay, thank you.
And just quickly through the desal project milestones, September 23rd, preliminary design findings with recommendations. Part of those recommendations will to release an RFP, which is a request for proposals for design, build, operate services. We hope to receive those in February and be ready for council to consider award pending water supply status, and that would put us online sometime in summer of 2016. Just to kind of highlight what we'll be discussing next week, we intend to go through the status of the study phase and all the information that was gathered. It's a pretty intensive effort of putting together all the information about what our existing facility can and can't do and what needs to be done to bring it back online. Also, a in-depth summary of our permits and where we stand with our permits. We'll be reviewing the costs that we anticipate for restarting the facility and operating it, and looking at the different funding options that are available. The comb pumping project, as you may recall, the lake level is getting to the point where we're no longer going to be able to gravity feed water to the south coast. Kachuma Operation and Management Board has been actively working on getting this pumping project in place, and as of the end of August, the pumping project is now in place and operational and is in standby mode. That cost for that project was about a little over $6 million. The city's share was $2.2 million. We're very optimistic. We've been working on several grants. One of them is a $500,000 grant from the State Water Resources Control Board that would go directly towards the city's cost, and then a larger grant issued through the Department of Water Resources for a $2 million grant for the entire project, which should be shared by all the participants. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Madeline Ward.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Madeline Ward. I'm the acting water conservation coordinator, and I will be going over a few highlights of the conservation program. As you can see, the Smart Landscape Rebate Program has really taken off. We've quadrupled the amount of pre-inspections we did this year compared to last year, so there's very high interest in the program. People are not only calling us to get recommendations on how to cut back inside, but also outside, and are taking action, not just thinking about it. We're very pleased to see that. The maximum still remains $1,000, and the average is about $700. We have quite a few people that just make small changes. Maybe they don't even have a lawn to begin with, but it could be something as simple as replacing pop-up sprinklers with drip systems. Not a lot of the irrigation retrofits are expensive at all. There's really simple changes that people are making, and we're happy to encourage them to do that. Also, it's been expanded to include pool covers. That's been a great program since they are now required as of May 20th. It's an extra incentive for those that don't have a pool cover right now to get a little money back when they cover it. Some are going with the basic light bubble wrap covers. Some have the very hard mechanical covers. It's up to them what they want to do. And then they just take a picture of it and submit the application to us. It's a really simple process. And hopefully you've been seeing our ads around town. We try to be everywhere that we can possibly be. We have different examples up on the screen of a television ad, print ad, online ad, and also social media. We are lucky in that we have a great coordination program countywide where we all work together on advertising. So we have similar messages, similar branding. Of course, there's people that live in Santa Barbara, work in Goleta, etc., and they see these wherever they are. We're all in this together, as we like to say, so we help each other out and are on different platforms. The county water agency has been helping with some of the social media ads that they've been doing, and we've been glad to be a part of that program. We also have a new WaterWise Citizen Spotlight. We always like to promote where you want to go. So we have wonderful people in our community that are cutting back. As you can see, overall, we're doing great with the 20% and the 25%. So we really want to highlight those individuals or businesses that are really being an example for the community of how they're cutting back. And we have a lot of people that have approached us, or we've met them via a water checkup, and they're great candidates for this. So we're planning to release one a month and do it via bill insert, social media, etc., to just celebrate these people who are just average citizens in our community that are really doing the right thing. And we're always looking for more, so you can always send them our way, and we can snap a few pictures and do a quick interview. Just an update on waste of water enforcement. We can tell that the community is very responsive. We have a lot of calls or reports online for our online reporting form. So far, we've had about 624 complaints logged in our database. 246 of those have been resolved. What we call resolved is that we've had an ongoing dialogue with the property owner, whether it's a home or a business, and it's generally something that's been repaired. And then we've had about 281 of no further occurrence. So we had the initial contact with them. We've come by and it's been, we haven't seen it again. So we haven't gotten confirmation from anyone that they fixed something. Generally, it's a behavior, actually. It's not using a shut-off nozzle or not watering during the correct times. And we don't have a further occurrence that we visually see, or it's not reported back to us. We have about 50 ongoing cases. These are the newer ones that we are still within the week period before we follow up with them or before we've heard back from them. And then we do have quite a few that are insufficient information, especially the ones with the online form where it just gives, it doesn't give an address and says the corner of this and this, there's a puddle of water. And it's hard for us to determine where it comes from or if there aren't any pictures or there's no clear violation. It just says waste of water on this corner. So if we get further information, then we'll be able to follow up. But there's a few out there that are just not quite all the information. Luckily, we've only had to do 10 notices of violation. That's the first letter, so it's still a warning. There's no fine for that. And as you can see, we have not had to give out any fines for anyone. They've all been corrected at this point. We tried to approach it as education rather than strict enforcement because a lot of these cases, people are unaware that their sprinklers are broken or spraying into the road, so that's the best thing. And we actually get some of these people that go through the rebate program, which is a win-win for everyone. Also, when we come back in October for the October drought update, we'll be bringing back the discussion that we had, I believe, in April about the short-term effects of increasing the water conservation budget during the drought. We did this analysis a few months ago, but we've had some increased information from the public and the media asking about it, so we want to bring it back and just refresh everyone's memory about the model and the analysis that we did on that.
Mr. Hart has a question.
Just while you're preparing that part of the presentation, if you could talk about the history of water conservation, go back to the previous drought, because I think people forget that there was tremendous infrastructure investment by local homeowners in low-flow toilets and low-flow showers, the first time that we had this occur. And so that the baseline, when we compare community to community in terms of water conservation, can be very different. So I think it'd be helpful to have some real context about that. And it might not have been what you were thinking about presenting, but I think it would add to what the public needs to understand about what we're doing now versus what has already occurred, and put that in context. So thank you.
Okay, perfect.
As you can imagine, with the drought, we've have increased our resources, labor resources, to try and be responsive to all the complaints and questions coming in and all the water checkups that we provide. We have been doing that with hourlies. And again, we had to put this budget together in the middle of last winter. And at this time, if we want to continue with those resources past December, we do need to increase our budget by about $225,000 to continue with those staffing resources. What we'd like to do, because of the way our hourly system works, it's up to 1,000 hours. Those employees, we'd have to let them go and hire new employees. Well, we've got these staff all trained. They're all knowledgeable about the current drought and about what homeowners and stuff need to do, that we are recommending that we modify the position control resolution to include permanent employees on a defined period. And so what we would do is be recommending employment through June 30th, 2015. And then should drought conditions continue, we'd want to extend that employment. But they've been really incredible. I don't know how else we could meet the demands. We've been trying to keep those checkups to no more than 3 weeks out, and trying to be responsive, following up on the 600 complaints. There's just a lot of work to be done there, and there's a lot of community who has questions. I mean, a lot of time spent on the phone just answering questions about what does this mean on my bill and how do I handle this. And our typical staffing is pretty lean and mean to start with. So this additional staffing has been incredible, and it's important that as part of the recommendation today, we can move this money from the water fund reserves to the drought fund to continue.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Kelly Dyer. I'm the Water Resources Supervisor. And before I go on to the next part of the presentation, I did want to go back to the question on evaporation, just to put it in perspective. The evaporation in Kachuma in 2013 was around 9,000 acre feet. So it's more than the city's entitlement, which is 8277. Just to give you a sense of
percent-wise, what does that mean? How do we figure?
So the annual entitlement to all member units is about 25,000. So in 1 year, it's
like 30% then.
Right.
Oh.
Well, I'm here today to talk about tools for influencing water usage. And so the city has a adopted water shortage contingency plan, which outlines the framework for responding to water shortage conditions, including demand management measures, particularly during drought. And so we are currently in stage 2 of the 3 drought stages that are defined in our plan. And we have implemented our conservation-based drought water rates, which incentivize the 20% required demand reduction. And we've also implemented regulations that have mandatory restrictions on water use. Council asked that we look into the legal requirements for implementing financial penalties, additional financial penalties for high water use. And I just want to take a moment to describe the difference between penalties and rationing. As I understand, penalties is a financial penalty that would be applied for relatively high water use within a customer class. And whenever that allotment would be exceeded, it would be a financial penalty and an ongoing financial penalty. With rationing, that would look at how much water we have available, determine the priority of how water should be used during a shortage, and allocate each customer with a certain amount that they can use. And if they go over that amount, subsequent violations would result in a flow restrictor or potential termination of service. So that's the difference, as I understand it. I want to make sure that we've framed the question correctly, that council was interested in understanding the legal requirements for the financial penalties. And in our research, we found that they can be implemented under our Municipal Code Title 14. It would be under the regulations during water shortage conditions. We would need to do some quantitative reasoning to outline the rationale for the level of the water use resulting in penalty, and adopt a resolution defining that water allotment, and revise the municipal code because it currently states the flow restrictor and termination of service for under that section of the code. And in our research, we did talk with the City of Santa Cruz staff, who is currently implementing the strictest rationing plan in the state. And I wanted to share with you what we learned and learned from them. They were very helpful in describing the process of developing their rationing plan. And it would require technical analysis and policy. It would have to be a public process to, determine the policies for setting the priorities of water use, whether that's public health and safety, business, irrigation, and then determining how much of each of our customer classes could have for those uses. We'd have to modify our billing system to impose the penalties once people exceeded their allotment, do public outreach so people understood what was coming and understood how much water they had available to them. And in our discussions, we found that it would probably take around 9 to 12 months to develop the plan and implement it within our system. So we would likely need to hire more staff to develop it, and would also prepare an ordinance and an appeal process for such a plan. Currently, we are working on Stage 3 water rates. It's drought water rates that incorporate the cost of desalination and other drought-related costs. And the result of that study will be higher financial penalties for water use. And so we're recommending that currently we continue with our current plan, which includes increased drought water rates with Stage 3, as well as potential additional regulations on water use applications.
And I guess, are you done? Okay, vision for a wetter tomorrow. I always like that. So we'll go to questions, and then we do have some public comment speaker slips. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, if we're going to go to questions now. Perhaps we should have public comment, and then we will have our comments
Sure.
ourselves.
Are there any questions?
I'll just wait on that.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hagmark, you mentioned the incentives for the tertiary treatment plant construction. Are there penalties or liquidated damages if they run over on the other side?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, yes, there are penalties, pretty heavy penalties. If I remember right, somewhere above $2,000 a day for delays beyond the completion date.
Right. And you also mentioned for the construction of the desal plant that our initial phase would be for the 3,000 or whatever the acre feet would be. Were there an adjacent or a partnering agency involved? Could that potentially be ramped up if some agreement could be reached ahead of time? If a neighboring agency, for example, wanted to participate in some way or another, just theoretically? Is it a financial issue as opposed to an actual structural phased-in issue? I guess my question.
The approach that we're currently taking is to minimize the exposure to the city as far as oversizing the facility.
Right.
But the partnering idea that we were planning to talk a little about that next week is complicated because of the permits that we currently have. We're not clear that that is an option yet, but that's something we haven't fully vetted. But that's one of the things at this point, we feel we are on solid ground with our own permits to reactivate the facility for this community.
Thank you.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Hart has been referring to droughts of the past. And so in terms of a rationing plan, we don't have anything on the books. And I got a little panicky looking at 9 to 12 months to develop something. I mean, if we're getting desperate, as I think we are, maybe rationing would be an option that we need to look at sooner.
So, Madam Mayor, Councilwoman Murillo, I feel like the tools that we currently have and was adopted by this council in 2011 provide us quite a bit of flexibility going forward to further push conservation if we need to go there. The challenges that we see when you go to rationing is rationing has this effect of increasing the costs to the lower users. It has, right now, you do have a few big users who are paying a lot of money for water, and it's kind of in general keeping the costs of water down for your lower 4 HCF, lower users. If you go to this rationing, you're really going to force them down into the smaller area, which is the goal of rationing, but you do it in a way that's really puts a lot of burden and costs on the lower users. And it is a method. I'm not saying it isn't a method that works, but I'm saying that for our community, we have, because of our ability to purchase water and because of desal, we have the ability to increase the costs of our water. What some of the challenges are with communities like Santa Cruz, they don't have access to any of those additional water supplies. So in accordance with Prop 218, they can't just raise their rates because they want to encourage. So that's why they have to go to rationing. For our community, we have these other supplies at our fingertips that cost a lot more money, and that can help drive down water usage through new rates that support those additional supplies.
So what I hear you saying is that there's encouraging more conservation on the part of our water customers is sort of a baby step toward rationing, right? Well, that's what I heard. And I wish people were saving more water. I really appreciate, the 25%. I'd like to continue to explore how to get people to use less water. Thanks.
Mr. Hart?
Well, I'm encouraged that people are saving water. So I'm looking at the glass half full. 25% is we're moving exactly. We're past where the target that we had, and we haven't met the target for the year because we weren't there initially. But I think what's happening is people are getting they're getting the bills and they're making changes, and I think as they continue to get those bills, they're going to continue to make changes. So I'm optimistic that we're going to see more conservation that's just happening as a result of these rates, and we'll have to monitor it and see. I think Mr. Hagmark mentioned that it gets more challenging as people's yards gets more stressed and people have a tendency to want to save stuff, and so that is a challenge, but we're going to see. Another reason for rationing is if we have a problem with people who are just have money and are not as sensitive about prices and are using water and just paying for it, and I understand that helps, kind of the cross subsidy of lower income people, and that's important to know that and understand that. But some of the other jurisdictions in the area are struggling with people who are just paying. And in fact, Montecito, that's one of the reasons why they said we're not going to let people do that. We're going to put a flow restrictor on you at a certain amount, and that's why they're rationing. One of the reasons why they're rationing. So the question for me is, do we have any customers like that are kind of insensitive to price and are not really towing the line? And is that, undoubtedly we have some, but is that a big problem? Is that something we should be concerned about? Is that something that you're monitoring carefully? Because I don't want to hear at some point, that 10% of the water in the city is being used by 10 customers and they don't care. And so I really want to know the answer to that.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, it is a great question and something we have been looking at and reached out to some of our larger users. It doesn't account for a significant portion of our system, and that's what we've stayed focused on and looking at the different categories of users. Certainly there's people that use a lot of water, and they're paying a lot of money for it right now, and allowing us to deliver water for everybody else for a slightly better price. But in the big picture, they're not significant. They're not. It doesn't represent the same issue that Montecito had and has and is working through. And kind of the counterbalance, I think it's important to understand too. They've gone, the communities that have gone to this kind of rationing are now, as Montecito is, they're now in getting into trouble because people are now have reduced their water usage. So now they don't have they're not paying the penalties anymore, and now they have an income issue. So they're scrambling now to try and go through the Prop 218 to get in place the rates to now support that. So I feel our approach keeps us from having to do that. And Santa Cruz is scrambling right now to get rates in place now to support that reduction in water usage that they're seeing. So it kind of, I feel that the path that we're on, the path chosen by this council is really the most prudent for this community at this time. And I think we have not exhausted the tools in our toolbox should we need to ask for additional conservation should something change.
Another complexity to rationing is, household size. And, you can do that. You can have a mechanism, I think, to address that. But that gets very complicated. And I'm not sure that is a good idea. Just because, if you allocate a certain amount of water per household, somebody that has one person gets to waste water outside. Somebody that has 5 kids, doesn't have enough water for internal use. So I think that's one of the reasons why philosophically we haven't gone there. And I think that's part of the consideration as well.
I had a question asked of me that I think you answered a while ago, but I just couldn't remember, so I'll ask it again. And I know it's not just our decision to make, but it has to do with Lake Cachuma. And the question was, why are we not dredging part of the bottom of Lake Cachuma, considering that it's at its lowest rate, lowest level in many years in terms of future planning for increased capacity when it rains again? And I know there's a complicated answer, but or maybe there isn't. Could you remind me what that answer is, though?
That's a great, Madam Mayor. The Board of Supervisors has actually awarded a contract for $500,000 to look countywide at options for increasing our water supply or going forward. That's something that they're looking at. That will certainly be one of the options that they look at. And we've looked at that as well for Gibraltar, but the cost benefit of that is significant. I'm trying to remember the numbers. It's like 140 truckloads per acre foot of soil removed. It's significant. And so the environmental costs, the economic costs of moving that soil is really pricey.
So that sounds like something looking longer term beyond this drought as we get into further discussion with the desal plant, beyond the emergency need for it, of that kind of cost-benefit analysis for us. I just want to keep that in mind. And if Lake Cachuma were to be dredged, or whatever the right term is, who makes that decision? Is that COME? Is that the county? Who's the permitting agency? How does that work? Do you know?
Madam Mayor, it is a complicated relationship. The Bureau of Reclamation owns and operates, owns the reservoir. COME, Cachuma Operation Management, kind of manages it on behalf of all the member participants, and so it would be a negotiation that we would get into, but I would guess the federal government would have to take the lead with that. That would be a significant project, and so I would imagine, I don't know, maybe Ms. Dyer can...
I wanted to also add that the purpose for dredging would be to increase the storage capacity, and typically any agency that's looked at this has found it to be more cost effective to raise the dam rather than dredging. And so it really is very cost prohibitive to do dredging, and finding out where you're going to put the dredge material tends to be problematic.
So raise the ceiling rather than lower the floor in terms of just trying to picture. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that reminder. I know it's complicated. We do have some public comment speakers slips here. We'll start with Phil Walker to be followed by Mike Jordan and then Ethan Shankman.
Yeah, if I came back as William Mulholland, as you all well know, the grandfather of the LA water system, I'd just do it, run a HDPE pipe down the banks of Mission Creek all the way to the ocean, put the sand, where it wanted to go, but you can't do that today. If you search the California Data Exchange website, it's of concern, especially the Sierra reservoirs. There are a lot of them from Tahoe down, and even above that are, Oroville's, the main state water supply reservoirs, down to below 30% right now. Same with Lake Shasta, it's down 30% or going south of that. And the thing that really caught my eye, I remember, was the San Luis Reservoir, the main north-south regulating reservoir on the California water aqueduct system. Is they're drawing it down, essentially mining it to it's down to 20% of capacity. So if things go south real bad, I can see some restrictions, declaration of a more severe emergency, limiting water supply and transfer availability. My concern I wanted to speak about very briefly is the loss of the historical trees, the stone pines on especially Anapamu. This is interesting, De La Vina and Mission Street. A couple doors up from that is the Braley Institute. I looked over, I did one of these. There's a huge Monterey pine. It's gone, and it's amazing, the size of that tree. But trees are starting to go lickety-split, and hopefully the city parks department, city arborist Tim Downey, can work with the property owners and get some water on their front lawns to try to preserve some of these trees. Thank you very much.
Mike Jordan.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I just have 3 or 4 quick points that I hope you'll include in the discussion. And one is that I think you'd find great support for just deciding to plan and pursue for continual use of desal going forward. When you're talking about rates and motivations just a minute ago, I think you would find that most people would just as soon pay more for an adequate amount of water rather than pay more for less water than they can use. Whether that's in conjunction with just ourselves, with neighboring communities, whatever that relationship looks like, I think that should be the plan. If you just took 25,000 water meters and the $5 million amount that's being bandied about for annual operating costs, that's $16 a month. Okay, I know it wouldn't be that simple when you're figuring it out, but certainly I wouldn't go to a movie every month just to help carry the operating costs of desal going forward. Along with that, I've been really frustrated at the lack of discussion points on both the increased production and use of recycled water. Again, whether it's just for us or for neighboring communities. I probably have my numbers off a little because they're pre-drought, and Joshua can tell you better. But we generally put out about 12 million gallons of water a day in drinking water out of Cater. By the time it gets down to LS Taro, it's 8 million gallons. So 4 million has gone off somewhere else, not down into the system. Of that, in good times, we can recycle 1.5 million or 2 million gallons for reuse, which means we put 6 million gallons of water a day out into the ocean. That's 6 million gallons of water a day that we paid to transport here, treated, got us down to the customer, and then we throw away into the ocean. It's clear that in the future we'll have a lot of trouble finding water to buy and transport to us, while at the same time we're throwing gallons away out into the ocean, and we need to find a better way to use that water. It also have, of course, the side benefit of just stopping the discharges out into the ocean of treatment water. And then finally, there's a lot of chatter in the background at Planning Commission, as I'm sure there are at the other design boards, on the contradictions between the steps collectively I'm being asked to take in letting my landscape die, putting buckets in the shower for my fruit trees, cutting back on lawns, while at the same time we're not taking any steps at all to look at new development and the net increase in water use. For example, just several weeks ago, we looked at a 4-story project review that had several hundred new toilets and bathrooms in the funk zone. Not a talk at that time over what the water use implications and the net gain were going to be as going forward as part of that project review. But at the same time, the community is being put under additional pressure to reduce the water to levels that actually sees their existing assets go away. So I would encourage you to take some steps there to address that also, as I think it's well past the time we should.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ethan Shankman.
Hi, I just want to make a quick reference in regards to the the bird bath water fountains that we have throughout the city that are on both private properties and public spaces. And it seems to me that due to evaporation control, if I'm not mistaken, is the reason why we have these fountains empty. And I don't know with all the statistics what impact or what an environmental impact report could provide for any kind of climate or area, region where birds would not otherwise be able to get clean. We've been worried about Nile viruses and other type of communicable diseases that could be traveled by birds, insects on birds, what have you. And it seems, once again, that a hygienic and a domestic safety control should be reevaluated for these water fountains, since it's really not making any real impact other than putting us at risk by not having them operating. And I'm talking about the bird bath water fountains, including the library, the courthouse. There are private properties that have basically depleted. I think the only fountain that's actually going right now is at the Lara Cotta Plaza for the turtles that I can think of. And it's like a vortex over there. You can literally feel it. It's just like, whoa. So maybe if we could evaluate our policy and let people start running those again, since the awareness of water shortage has already been met. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the public comment. Can you just remind us with the regulations, we did not we are still allowing water fountains, private property fountains, bird baths. That's not prohibited anymore unless it's a certain capacity. Is that correct?
They're allowed on residential properties.
On residential properties, but not public properties, unless there's already turtles and stuff and koi in there. We're not killing the fish or the turtles.
Certain size.
The fountains, if they are larger than 25 square feet in water surface area, those are the ones that need to be turned off. So a lot of the smaller fountains, whether they're on commercial properties or not, are still on, as well as any residential ones. So even just a residential bird bath is a water feature. It's not necessarily a running fountain, but those can still remain on. It's just those very large ones that have been turned off.
Okay. And thank you. So we'll get to comments, and I just want to, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. White. Last week at the joint meeting between the council and the Planning Commission, I agree with Commissioner Jordan about design review and looking at our landscape design guidelines, and suggested at that point maybe at our next 6-month review to have that kind of conversation, but perhaps even as we talk about the third stage drought regulations, we need to bring in community development and bring in our design review team for those kind of discussions, which might have a longer term effect for water conservation. As Mr. Hart was saying, the last drought we did the internal structural things, the toilets, the washing machines, the dishwashers, and so forth. Maybe this drought will remind us what can we do in terms of our own regulations and policies regarding outside and irrigation. But it is I agree, there's kind of a counter. You want things. You have new projects going through a design review process that those guidelines have not really changed as much, and maybe we should take a fresh look at them and have your department and community development work together on that. And stage 3 might be a good timing to do that. So those would be my comments for now. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this is a really good update today. I thought the staff did an excellent job of bringing us and the community up to date on where we are. And I particularly appreciate the the comments about what's happening in Kachuma and also going forward. I still think there's, as you say, there's some more to be done. Perhaps, and every month I'm sure we'll get more information on what's going to be our share left next year, again, as these at least another year out, and then what downstream releasers are getting, et cetera. Just so what is our share going forward is clearly an important piece of that. But I thought this was the best summary of the status of Kachuma that we've had so far, and also the water purchases and the what we bought and what we can buy going forward. Again, that conversation is one that you did a much better job today in providing that, and I know I appreciate hearing month in and month out just where we are on that issue, and I'll be continuing to ask questions about that. On the water rate issue, I still want to make sure that as we're going forward with this water rate analysis, that we have as our extreme end the full cost recovery option for not just the desal option, but all just the full proverbial Monty of costs, to at least have it as an extreme option for pricing going forward. And one thing, perhaps, do you have the slide that has the amount of Block 3? You've now, the last couple of sessions, I've seen that slide that shows. You don't have that with you. Okay. Well, there's maybe next time bring that along if you can. I think it starts to show. We've had a couple of comments by council members today about that right there. Yeah. And that shows that Block 3 is that green. No.
That's correct. Commissioner White, the green lines, you'll be looking at 2013.
Tier 3.
Tier 3. That's the Tier 3 users, and it looks to be approximately 100 acre-feet used in that category for the month of July.
Okay, so, and roughly a quarter of the use, or a little less, 20% of the use is in Tier 3. Mm-hmm. So that kind of speaks a little bit. It's not totally where Mr. Hart was going with who are the big users, but that's at least the high-end users, and you do see a pretty good drop there. Well, at least from 2013, but that's an area where we'd be looking at, particularly if we go into stage 3. That's where we're going to be hoping to at least gain to reduce use some amount. And just as a harkening back, we're talking about the last drought. In the last drought, Tier 3 was. How much is Tier 3 now? Is it per unit? Is it
I believe it's around $13 a unit.
$13 a unit. So in that, as I recall, in 1990, I think it was $27. And that, of course, was $27 was the equivalent of $42 today or something like that. So we had and it was just done. It was literally a number picked. It was just proverbially picked out of the air, but that was an important limit on what people spent on water in those days. Another point I want to make is groundwater. I'm concerned, for example, that folks could drill wells, in particular in Basin 1, as water gets more expensive. The city does not have a ban on wells, and we at least need to get started on a ground. I mean, obviously we've got so many water things going on. All we need is one more set of studies and stuff to do. But we do need a policy base ground, and I know the state is finally getting around to doing something on a statewide basis. But clearly, this city needs to have strong control over, in particular, Basin 1, but really all of our groundwater resources. And we see problems in our foothill basin related to sort of a little bit of a frontier approach and some kind of irrational water laws there. But we just need a more sensible policy around groundwater, and in particular, as I say, I see no reason for people to be able to drill wells in particular in Basin 1. I thought all of Mr. Jordan's points were good ones. The desal, that the number ongoing looks reasonable, and that the reclaim, there's got to be some more potential for reclaim above the 1,000 acre feet per year that we can use now. And appreciate the mayor's comments about let's have a look at that what the impacts of new development are and how we want to minimize those impacts going forward. We don't want to shut off the new development options. I mean, for example, there are many projects that are coming forward that they're actually using less water than the existing use on the site. Well, that should be allowed to go forward. But it needs to be something that everyone feels is fair, because we're all tightening down in a whole bunch of different ways, and we're all trying to have a sense of this being a just system going forward. So I think having that transparency, talking about it, and then being able to frame for ourselves and for our community the impacts of new development proposals is appropriate for this city to be talking about ongoing. Thank you. And obviously, it's heartening that we're seeing a reduction in use. It surprised me. I frankly was concerned that we weren't going to get there. Finally, Ms. Murillo's comments, worries about the future, sort of my, at least really quick calculations say that we could have, in the worst possible case, we have 7,000 acre feet of desal in a couple of years if it doesn't rain, and we have a pipe that allows us to buy water from the rest of the state to the tune of 3,000 acre feet a year. Is that correct? So 10,000 acre feet of water is our lifeline quantity, which is kind of a ballpark number for what we hope to use in our tight drought numbers. That's a survival number of water for this city, obviously with sacrifices being made. So that would involve policy changes all over the state. But I think as the reality hits, 80% of the water in the state is used for agriculture. There's water used for irrigated pasture, alfalfa, rice, cotton, all kinds of crops that are not as high value, and obviously our urban system will need to get some strong attention should the drought continue. So I feel optimistic that as long as the desal and that pipe is there, that the city can weather a long-term drought. Thank you.
The governor, either today or yesterday, just signed a bill about groundwater basin regulations, and so perhaps at the next update you can tell us how that affects us and what other things we may need to do, or if it's just how that all fits in the bigger puzzle. That would be helpful. Mr. Hotchkiss and then Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How expensive is it to drill a private well?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, a private well is probably about $25,000 to drill a well, and that's probably under normal times. I don't know what the well is going for these days, but somewhere in there.
Prohibitive, I think we could say.
It's pretty pricey. Yeah.
Am I correct in saying we're trying to hit a sweet spot of saving enough water but not too much? Because if we save too much, we're going to have to boost rates because we don't have enough in the enterprise fund to make our system continue running without exhausting reserves?
I think there's always a fine line there. I think at this point I'm less focused on the financial aspect of it and more focused on getting the conservation. Once we're there, we can kind of figure out what the finances need to be to support that level of conservation.
Okay, but that is a part of the formula, is it not?
Absolutely. We're looking into it, and we are monitoring it closely to make sure that we don't find ourselves in some financial situation that we got to dig out of.
Mr. Hart?
Well, I just want to echo Councilmember White's congratulations to staff. This has really been the best presentation that we've seen. But I think more importantly, the fact that we're doing this so regularly, if somebody's watching on a regular basis, they really understand this issue in a very comprehensive way, because you're doing a great job cumulatively of adding to the information people have. And, as we ask questions, you bring back more information. So I think that, the public and the media that are here following this, really can't leave here without really having a very clear, transparent understanding of where the city is. And what it really speaks to is the long-range planning that's been going on for a very, very long time. This is not ad hoc. This is implementing a plan that was established long before there was a drought, and it was very thoughtfully considered, and we're going through the steps incrementally, and as the severity of the situation gets more intense, we have planned for the next step and the next response. And a lot of the things we're talking about today are part of stage 3. What do we do when we get to that stage? And this has been thought about, and there's a plan, and we're gonna be ready to implement that. And there will obviously be some choices at that stage, but it's not going to be reinventing the wheel. And the best example, I think, is the conversation about development. And that is, intuitively, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why are we letting people build new things? Well, the reason is because more often than not, that new thing uses less water than the old thing. And that's hard to explain. It isn't intuitive, but it's very technical and fact-based. And I think that it's easy to point at that and say we shouldn't be doing that. But I think, giving us information about that and explaining that in a very precise way is very helpful, particularly, as the mayor mentioned, in regards to outdoor landscaping, because we do have different standards. And we are asking, particularly with commercial development, to do very different outdoor landscaping than wasn't the case in the past. And that is why commercial development can be net less water use than it was in the past. I guess I have a question for the city attorney about our legal ability to regulate private wells. And yes, the state has passed very, very, very modest regulations of groundwater. And, that's understandable. The ridiculousness of the state regulatory framework for groundwater is something that was based on miners, diverting rivers to do mining, and then getting water rights from that point in the 1850s and having that carry forward through makes absolutely no sense. None of this makes any sense, really, when you step back from it and look at almonds and pistachio growers that use more water than San Diego and Los Angeles combined for residential use. So none of this makes any sense. But it's, the state in its own slow way is incrementally moving forward and regulating groundwater. But does the city even have the legal ability to prohibit? I mean, is our water basin adjudicated? Can we say no to something like that?
It's not adjudicated to my knowledge, but the city has the inherent police power to regulate these groundwater within its borders. It hasn't been done very much. It's more often been done by counties, and there are a couple of cases upholding counties' ability to regulate groundwater use. The most common regulation I've seen for cities is what I would characterize as an anti-paralleling law that says basically if you're going to take city water, you can't have a well as well. And the motivation traditionally for that was to prevent cost bypass on the system. But you clearly have the authority to regulate groundwater in time of drought.
That's good to know.
I'd add one last thing I wanted to mention in regards to the groundwater legislation the governor signed. When our local basins make it to the priority list, they're not there yet as far as I can tell from Bulletin 118, the city will have the ability to step in and become the Zancaro, so to speak, for the basin and the water master for the basin and be a controlling regulator. So that's something we'll brief further with the staff and come back to you on.
Good. And then just finally, I know Councilmember White mentioned having the 218 top-tier modeling fee include full cost recovery. I agree with that, too. I think that makes sense. This is the moment when people are prepared to pay, a little more to make sure that we're fully funding all of our options. And so I'm supportive of that as well.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, obviously the results or the current trends are good as far as our citizens and our water usage goes. I I think there's a lot of that has to do with the rate structure. A lot of it has to do with the promotion from staff. But I also think this community, I still have faith in the kind of the esprit de corps of this community to do things in a cohesive way, to come together and realize that we do have a common problem. And I do believe in our ability to adjust in that manner. The comments that Mr. Jordan have, I think, kind of rang home with me, because I remember asking many of these questions during the initial analysis of Plan Santa Barbara and all the density infill we had talked about at the time. And I asked the question then, do we have the infrastructure, both in supply, transfer, and wastewater capacity, along with our recycled water, reclaimed water, to have this entire plan go forward? And I was told at the time, well, yes, we do. I was told by the folks that sat on the different water commissions and whatnot. I wonder if I asked that same question today, if I would get the exact same answer. And I'm not really sure. And I'm asking this kind of rhetorical. I don't have an answer. But I wonder if we should not, going forward, have some kind of methodology to look at these uses. Because I know whatever the customer tier graph says, and it's about outdoor landscaping, it's about single-family residence. So I have to go with the graph. But there's something that's anecdotally sensical about looking at when you have a building with 40 bathrooms and showers and toilets, there's going to be a use, there's going to be an impact. And given our current situation and given our infrastructure going forward, we should maybe take a cautionary look at some of these projects. Thank you.
Ms. Maria.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Thanks for the presentation. So I have concerns about using desal. And when we first started talking about it, there was a much lower acre feet figure that we were talking about, and now we're talking about 7,500, right, acre feet. And I'm looking at the graph here, and it looks like that in the year 2017, we're going to be counting on a whole lot of desal water. And I would just like to say that I think we should go more slowly on that. Desal is going to use a whole lot of energy, and if there will be impacts to the ocean environment, especially if we go forward with the open water intake. So the more water we take in, the more fish that we're going to harm. So I get it that we're in a desperate situation. I would just prefer to see conservation as a way to make up for those gaps. And as such, I do support Part B of the staff's recommendation in terms of this increase in funds. Just going on record that we should go very slow on desal. There's a lot of impacts to it. So I move staff recommendation A and B.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, moved and seconded. Any other comments? We'll have a big conversation about desal next week. So for all those listening and wanting to tune in, same time, same channel next week. Thank you again for an excellent report. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, we can move on to item 14.
Police Department update.
Good afternoon, Chief, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you. For whoever's going to be next. Okay, we'll go to the first slide. Thank you for having us today. We're back with an update, and Appreciate you allowing a little more delay so we can get past Fiesta so we can show you those statistics. Before we get to the 4th of July statistics and Fiesta statistics, we're going to talk about Part 1 crime. We also have added to the bottom right some comparisons to Santa Maria and Ventura. If you look at 2012, between 2012 and 2013, we had a 13% decrease in Part 1 crime, which is pretty outstanding. Santa Maria and Ventura had some increases, but I wanted to put some perspective into other cities and what they're going through, so we added them to this. In 2012, and I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but the ones that were a little large for Santa Barbara anyway was the homicide issue. In 2012, we had 0. In 2013, we had 4. 2 of those were vehicular. 1 stabbing and 1 shooting. That was in 2013. And because we do have the 13% decrease, we're very happy with that, but I'm happy to report that from July 1 to today, Part 1 crime is even lower than that today. So it's going down for now. Most of it is because of great police work and great community and luck. 4th of July and Fiesta were both pretty safe. There you see 3 years of statistics for July 4th. We were busy, but it was safer, and I think more people had a great time. And we responded to many, many calls, but in terms of violence, it was down. We had a lot of municipal code. If you see 64 in 2014 and only 22 in 2013. And when we talk about that, we're talking about open containers, drinking in public, things like that. So it was up from the previous 2 years to 64, and those were citations. Traffic citations were up on 4th of July this year, and it was more than double from the year before in terms of traffic citations. In terms of arrests, that was interesting. Felonies, 6 in 2013, 6 in 2014. Many misdemeanor arrests, however, in 2014. But all in all, calls handled by the 4th of July units. These are just statistics for those units that worked the beach and all 4th of July activities. And calls for service handled by these units was 28, and reports taken was 9. So it was real safe, pretty quiet. And all in all, a good time for everyone. But that goes to show you that the combination of collaboration with Public Works, Highway Patrol, ourselves, and others, and the businesses just makes it for a safer time. But we're still aggressive on everything that we do, and I think when we nip it in the bud immediately, it helps it go safe. So this year and last year, pretty safe. This year, much more safe. Fiesta. This year was the 90th annual. It was the second year in a row where it was, again, safe. Everyone had a great time. We do have issues. Most of our issues are always related to alcohol use and abuse, and a lot of underage drinking and things like that. But if you look at Fiesta, we've got the week there for you, spread out each day, the number of calls, the types of calls, numbers of arrests. When you look at the arrest side there, number 48 total for the week, most of those were warrants or people that were wanted that we ran into. We had one individual who was wanted for attempted murder who decided to come and enjoy Fiesta, and we ran into him in the street. So that was one of those arrests. I guess sometimes they think that we're not going to be active, but we were, and we were able to make that arrest. But the 48 felonies were mostly warrants and several arrests that were observed and assaults with a deadly weapon, but most were warrants, not actual crimes in progress. Wednesday was, in terms of felony arrests, was the busiest day. We're very aggressive. We try to get aggressive on the very first day and just set the tone for how we're going to police the city at all events from beginning to end of Fiesta. And again, as last year, it was all in all a safe Fiesta. When we look at the 88 misdemeanors, again, a few fights here and there, but mostly misdemeanor issues, public intoxication and things like that. No real big crimes, and we were very happy for the second year in a row that it went very safe. Again, in collaboration with Parks and Rec, Public Works, when we were dealing with the Cascarone issue, the vendors selling the food on the corners, Nancy's department and mine, and we just did, I think our folks did a really great job of addressing that immediately and took care of business there. So again, very proud of our folks, and another safe fiesta 2 years in a row. The next fiesta slide, just a little larger numbers, just the last 3 years. We were very busy, again, 171 municipal codes, 58 miscellaneous infractions, so nothing really to write home about vicious crimes or violent crimes. We were very lucky in that way. The arrests were up again. The totals for 2014 clearly are the same as 2012, a little more than 2013. And again, once again, all 3 years, mostly warrant arrests, not actual assaults in progress. We had 22 DUIs, which was the same as 2012. Our motor team was very active. We also get help from the CHP motor units and sheriff motor units every night of the Fiesta week, and that really assists us as well, and we're very appreciative of them in keeping our streets safe. I'm going to turn it over to the Deputy Chief. He's going to talk a little bit about CompStat, what we're doing. I think you're going to see that experience these charts a little bit more user-friendly, and we can take questions at the end or whenever you wish, but I'm going to turn it over to Frank for a few minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of council. As the chief spoke to earlier, we're seeing a decrease in violent crime across the boards. This chart shows what we're seeing in this category right here is year to date. So as of the past several calendar years, as of August, in the last 3 years, we've seen a very good drop-off compared to the previous time. And then this chart shows an overall increase in what we had seen in the previous years for the year total. So end of year total for 13 was a little higher than we would have liked it to have been. However, right now, year to date, it's lower. So currently for the last 8 months, it's trending down. The primary leader in the category of violent crime, next slide, is our aggravated assaults. And we have our violent crimes charted here. And you can see for the beginning of the year, our aggravated assaults were a little higher than we'd like, and we've seen a drop-off considerably and a slight trending up. What we've seen is about a 6.5% increase in the rate of aggravated assaults this year compared to a 5-year average. So if you've taken the last 5 years, averaged them out, a 6.5% increase, and to put that in terms of context and perspective, that's about 2 felony crime reports a month. So it's not a large number to give us that rate of increase. And we've also looked into what types of crime to see if we have a trend that we can, attribute to any one specific type of violent crime, and the answer is no. So we're just seeing, domestic violence assaults and other types of assaults, batteries and felony batteries. Just a very slight increase of about 2 more reports per month will account for that 6.5% increase.
So you said aggravated assaults. Could you specify that for the public?
Yes,
you mentioned some, but...
For example, a domestic violence would be an aggravated assault. A felony battery where someone's in a fist fight, for example, and they get a broken nose out of it, that would be an aggravated assault. Assault with a deadly weapon where someone, uses a knife or attempts to use a knife on somebody else, that would be an aggravated assault.
Thank you.
So overall, our violent crime is trending well. In the other categories of crime, they're trending very well. So if we look at the categories of homicide, as the chief alluded to, we've essentially only had 1 homicide in the past 12 months, and that was a vehicular homicide. The rapes are down. You can see we only had 1 rape last month compared to an average of 3 a month. So that's doing well. And we did have 7 robberies and slightly below average of 8 robberies over that 5-year window. And then the aggravated assaults, if we look at this, an average of 24 per month,
we can see that generally speaking, we're right about average, and we'd have to go way back here before we see that we're well above average. So the trend is our friend right now, even though we are paying attention to it. Next slide. This is our category of property crime, and you see that thick, heavy blue line at the bottom. That's this year. That's this calendar year that's being represented on that graph. And what you'll notice about that line is it's well below all the others, which is exactly where we want it to be. So property crime is trending low right now. Residential burglaries are trending low. All thefts across the board are trending low. So we're very happy with that. If you look at our year-to-date column over here, you can see it's substantially lower than where we have been over the last several years. And 13 was essentially the lowest year we've had in the past 5 years, 2013. And 2014 is trending below that. So property crime is trending in the right direction. Next slide. These are some of the specific property crimes that we're tracking, and some of the one area that gave us a little concern at one point was commercial burglary. We had 1 month where commercial burglary took a bit of a spike. Right here is represented by this green line, but it immediately trended back down again. And right now we are seeing a little bit of an increase in some theft from vehicles. So we're aware of that. Our criminal impact team is aware of that. They're taking steps to try and suppress that crime. But I think we're going to see at end of year that theft from vehicle will also be below average because it's been trending low all year. Next slide. And then this final slide just has to do with other thefts. And if you look at our average here of other thefts, this is our last category of 137 thefts per month. You'll notice that none of these represent 137. So for the entire 12 months, we've been lower than our 5-year average. So this trend is obviously very good, and it's helping to give us that overall reduction in Part 1 crimes.
Other theft being?
Just a simple larceny.
Breaking in somebody's car?
No, that would be a burglary. It would be maybe a stolen bicycle, or, if you left your wallet on a bar counter and someone stole your wallet, just a simple theft. Next slide. That concludes our Part 1 crime recap.
We're going to talk some about our downtown corridor process and some of the things that we're doing. Captain Whittam's here to discuss it at length, but we continue to aggressively deal with the issues of a few months ago. We've put a lot of resources into that. We have changed people's schedules to make sure that we cover the downtown corridor and business community corridor heavily, and we continue to do that. It continues to be very, very successful. We've got other things in mind for the future, but before we talk about that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Whittam, who will get into more detail about the issues downtown.
Thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. Captain Whittam with the Patrol Division, and I'm going to discuss just a bit of what we've done this year with the downtown corridor. And if I could take you back to earlier in the year, we had an issue with our young urban travelers. What we did with them is we had a maximum enforcement posture where we gave them 24/7 attention. We deployed resources in terms of our tactical patrol force, our beat coordinators, and our criminal impact team to mitigate those issues, along with some other tools that we had in the areas of where they camp. So while we saw a decrease in their activity, we continue to monitor that activity, so that has improved greatly. What I'm going to focus on for this presentation is one of the issues that has plagued downtown for years is our skateboarders, bicycles, and rollerbladers. And as you may know, that we do have an ordinance 10.6.010, which prohibits in the downtown corridor skateboarding, rollerblading, and bicycling on the sidewalks. So on August 14th, with a collaborative effort with our beat coordinators, with Officer Butel, she began handing out flyers to many of the skateboarders downtown, the groups, and down at the skate park, just to give them an idea that we're going to have a maximum enforcement posture with that level of crime and that nuisance. So they were handed those, given a warning that the police department is going to have a heavy enforcement posture. And on August 17th, KEYT aired a segment outlining our enforcement posture. They did this a couple of nights, talking about how the police department was going to enforce the issues of skateboarding and how unsafe it is to do that and do that activity. So on August 20th, our enhanced efforts of skateboarding enforcement began. We began with some warnings, and on that date, we handed out 17 warnings and 9 citations were issued. We're going to continue to enforce the laws pertaining to skateboard, bicycling, and roller skating. And up to this date, since we started our heavier enforcement posture, we've issued 23 citations and numerous warnings to those who sometimes the issue is what we really want to do is change the behavior of those committing the crimes of this level, and oftentimes a warning does suffice in doing that. So we continue to step up our efforts in making sure that our sidewalks are safe downtown.
To clarify, those 3 groups can ride on the street in the bike lane, right? You can skateboard?
They cannot.
Cannot.
A skateboarder, a rollerblader, both of those categories are considered pedestrians, so they can't be in the street and using that. A bicycle obviously can, but the vehicle code does not allow them to be skateboarding on the street.
Now, can they do that in the street in areas other than the downtown corridor?
On the sidewalk areas outside the downtown corridor, it's allowed to be skateboarding on the sidewalk. There's no prohibition from that.
How about in the street?
Not in the street. A
Anywhere.
skateboarder is considered a pedestrian.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I want to bring to attention.
Mr. White, go ahead.
Thank you. When you give a warning, does that get recorded somehow? I mean, does somebody get a warning, and then if they get caught again, then they get a citation? I mean, I know for car stuff that happens, but how about with like the skateboarders?
Councilmember White, it's really based on the discretion of the officer who makes that detention. If an officer decides to run that person in the system to see if they have any warrants or if they've been cited before, then it's captured in the system. However, if it's just a simple warning where if I saw somebody, and I do this often while I'm downtown, and I see somebody riding a skateboard, I'll stop them, I'll talk to them, issue them a warning, and there's nothing recorded within our system to show we've given a previous warning, other than I know that person. Right. Okay. Also, I want to bring the council's attention that we and the public that we have added a foot patrol officer in the downtown corridor. With the retirement of Officer John Katai in July, that was not a permanent position, but we did extend that to be a permanent downtown Tactical Patrol Force footbeat officer position, and that was filled by Officer Greg Hans, who is back here in council most days. So, we also added a second Tactical Patrol Force officer position and assigned to that officer to the downtown area as a foot patrol officer in August, and that was Officer Dustin McGrew. What this does is it provides us 7-day-a-week coverage for foot patrol officers in the downtown corridor. We will continue our efforts, as the third bullet point says, to address the nuisance-related street crime issues we have in the downtown corridor. It's a team effort involving the beat coordinators, the beat officers, and the downtown foot beat officers. We'll continue to crack down with the skateboarding and additional officers on foot. We are able to more effectively and efficiently respond to crimes and nuisance issues in the downtown corridor with this collaborative effort.
Great. Well, I warned you I was going to have some questions related, since we're on this slide, instead of waiting to the end, it seems apropos to ask you in relation to the conversation this council had last week, and as it relates to what's known as the yellow shirts, or community service liaisons with our restorative policing program. Okay. So I maybe just to help enlighten all of us and give us up to date about that program, specifically how many what the FTE is, or how many people are on our yellow shirts, what their hours of duty. I know they're hourly, they're not regular staff. Do you have any vacancies at the moment? Those were some questions. Why don't we start with just the basics first, and then I can
Certainly,
continue.
Madam Mayor. What I'll do is I'll speak to, and what's commonly referred to as our yellow shirts are our community services liaisons. That's their official title. But we see them out there in yellow shirts as a high visibility patrol. And I'm going to talk about what they do, what their mission is. And they're an hourly, non-sworn 20-hour per week position that work during daytime hours. They're highly visible in their yellow shirts for identification. They also work directly with our Tactical Patrol Force supervisor, with businesses, with residents and visitors along the identified areas, and primarily it's State Street, originally Cabrillo Boulevard, and Milpa Street. Currently, we staff State Street with 2 community service liaisons, and we service Milpa Street with 2 community service liaisons. Currently, we have 4 staffed with 2 vacancies. They make frequent contact with businesses and business owners. Our yellow shirts are a component of restorative policing in such as they identify persons who may be candidates for the restorative policing program. They do referrals to our restorative policing, and what I have them do is they conduct a log of activity on a weekly basis. So we have how many contacts they make, anything that's unusual they see. They have an outside remarks box. So they do have an activity log that they create on a weekly basis. Then I also have a monthly statistic sheet for not only their role, but the blue shirts and the restorative policing officers. Their job is also to identify nuisance-related crimes, report illegal behavior to the police department as they see it. They're not armed with police radios, but they do have telephones to contact either the officers they're working with or the police department. What they do provide is a deterrent to unacceptable behavior by maintaining high visibility. They meet with businesses and report concerns of deviant and criminal behavior to restorative policing in an effort to mitigate and resolve issues. What we require them to do is represent the city favorably to the public, to the visitors, and to the members and the citizens of the public. They do, as I mentioned, fill out a weekly log of activity for the TPF supervisor and restorative police officers to review for them. I do want to mention what they're not supposed to do. What we don't require them to do is to take independent enforcement action for things that they see. They're not trained as police officers. We don't equip them with the equipment to take care of and handle the things that we do, so we don't want them to do that because we don't want them to get hurt or to elevate a situation. They don't write citations to individuals. So if they see activity, we don't want them to write tickets. And we don't want them involving themselves in any life-threatening type situations. Like a citizen, what we expect them to do is to observe and report it. But they are in a high visibility mode when they're out there representing the city. In terms of how many we have currently, we have staffing. We have 4 yellow shirts currently staffed with 2 vacancies. And we, on our blue shirt side, what we have is 2 that are currently staffed, and we do have 2. We're looking at what the balance should be with the funding that we have in terms of whether we would get more efficient use with the funding with 1 more blue shirt versus the 2 yellow shirts and fill that vacancies. We do currently have a list of for the blue shirts, which is the restorative policing outreach specialists. To possibly bring on 1 more. So we are still in the hiring process for the blue shirts.
So if I'm understanding currently, if 2 individuals on State Street and their hourlies at 20 hours a week each, so it's basically 40 hours a week on State Street, if we're just talking about State Street.
Just on State Street,
and
yes.
So if and when those 2 vacancies are filled, would that include a third 20 hours on State Street, or would it go to Milpas, or shared, or the waterfront? What would be, if you were fully staffed, what would be the number of hours around State Street, I guess?
It would be the same. That those 2 that are vacant right now are the ones that would staff Cabrillo Boulevard and the waterfront.
So you're saying there's 0 hours right now on Cabrillo Boulevard?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's how. All right.
That's how they're portioned out currently.
And what is the budget on? What is the budget?
The total budget is for the entire.
Just the community service liaisons portion, the 6, if we were fully staffed.
If we were fully staffed, it is what the projected budget that we're going to be spending on them is $58,903. If you take that in their hourly rate, it would be on just the community service liaisons. We have budgeted for them $97,200.
Okay, so $100,000. I'm going to round up.
Yes.
$100,000 for the yellow shirt portion of the restorative policing program per year.
That's correct.
Okay, so given the conversation we had last week, and we're going to come back with options, I know, so I know we're not making any decisions today, but just to, since we're talking about this, what's the difference with what Yellow, because I'm hearing that the community service liaisons, I'm going to use the correct term, they obviously are under the restorative policing program. However, they do still interact with beat coordinators. They still call in when they see inappropriate activity. They still interact with business owners. They still work with the tactical patrol force. What is the difference between what they do with what we were being asked to have, the proposal that was presented to the council last week in terms of a security firm dealing with similar inappropriate behavior?
In terms of the difference of what our restorative outreach specialists do, our community service liaisons.
What's the difference between the two?
There is definitely a crossover in the missions of what they do. Primarily what our community service liaison specialists were supposed to do is work with our restorative policing to make referrals. They were also to check in with the businesses. And if you think in terms of checking in with the business, they're asking for what are those nuisance-related items that deal with homeless persons. And that's primarily what their mission was in the beginning, because they were put as part of restorative policing to assist them in that mission. In a broader sense, what the safety guides mission is for just simply the entire downtown corridor versus, and remember, the Yellow Shirts work in 3 different geographical locations.
Sure.
So while they do have a crossover in what their mission would be, specifically the safety guide program was for downtown. Restorative, our Yellow Shirts are for a greater part of the city, but they do have a crossover in what they're supposed to be doing, but primarily working with restorative policing and making referrals, checking in with businesses. And they belong to us, and their mission can be very fluid.
Okay, so to turn that question around, are there things that the community service liaisons are not doing that were part of the proposal that was presented to us last week regarding a private security firm?
I don't think there were many things that they're not doing that would be part of that program.
Okay. Well, that helps put that in context. I don't think we needed that information. That was helpful for me in terms of figuring out what the best approach is. So that's helpful. Okay. And I see some lights on now. Sorry. Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of months ago, in one of these monthly updates, we discussed starting to develop quantify the calls for service that the Yellow Shirts. I still get stuck with using Yellow Shirts.
That's fine.
To quantify the calls for service that the Yellow Shirts have been calling in. Do we have any numbers on that yet?
I mean, specific. Are you talking, Councilmember White, specifically how many times they call the police for calls for service?
Right.
I have weekly logs of all the Yellow Shirts, and I didn't compile that into an exact number of how many calls for service they call, because they have a multi-purpose mission, which is to contact the businesses. Sure. And they do call when they see things, so I can quantify that and send it to you.
Well, I think just as time goes by, that's just can become a helpful guide for how, at least for me, and perhaps others might be interested in that information.
And I can tell you, just from the empirical data, I can average it's probably 3 times a week that they're calling for police assistance.
Okay, well, I'd appreciate that sort of getting to be something that we're checking in on in as part of these updates. Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How do the Yellow Shirts interact with tourists?
Councilmember Hotchkiss, do they? Is that your question?
Do they, or how do they?
Sure. Well, as being a high visibility downtown patrol that's specifically marked as a city employee,
right?
Oftentimes they'll get contacted by tourists. I know Chuck Reed specifically, who has a very outgoing personality, oftentimes interacts with the public, as do the others. We've got very dynamic type personalities. Our 2 members who work the Milpas area are actually members in that area. So, I mean, they live there. So, they know many of the citizens that live in the area, and they interact with them. Our downtown ones oftentimes do interact with the public. I don't have numbers for you, but, as a high visibility patrol, that they do oftentimes get contacted by public members.
So do we encourage them to say, welcome to Santa Barbara?
It's not part of their mission. I don't think that that's specifically encouraged. I think they do it oftentimes when they're asked questions. But do they reach out kind of as a concierge? No, that wasn't part of their mission.
What would you say their most, difficult assignment typically is, or encounter, if I can put it that way?
Dealing with the homeless population, and oftentimes that
somebody being in their face a little bit.
Yeah, those can be difficult persons to deal with, and remember that is a part of what their mission is. So they do contact oftentimes members of homeless, try and gather intelligence and information to pass on to our restorative policing team, in an effort to identify those populations that could use the services that restorative policing provide.
Do we see any increase or decrease in recent months of the street population?
Well, we saw a definite decrease after our enhanced enforcement efforts downtown, but now we've seen, I think, a decrease in our street people, in our transient population. We look at that in terms of on a daily basis. We have our foot patrol officers, members of my staff make daily runs up and down State Street over at the homeless shelter on Melpa Street to make sure that we know we have the pulse of what's going on in the city in terms of those nuisance issues.
It seems to me to change drastically daily. Down in Stork Placida, you'll get 12 people one day and 3 dogs, and the next day, nothing. So, okay, thanks.
I want to acknowledge also Mr. Reed in the back, who is one of the community service liaisons, and thank you for the work that you do. Mr. Hart, and then Mr. White.
Well, I really appreciate this information. I appreciate the questions that the mayor was asking. I think this would have been really helpful last week, this level of detail when we were talking about the different ideas, because it really is. I mean, that's the first time I've heard that the community service liaisons essentially are doing, what we were talking about doing with the security guards. I mean, I'd heard a different spin last week about it being much more limited to the role that it plays in restorative policing. But it didn't make sense to me that they wouldn't be responding to things that were happening on the street. I mean, they're there, they're eyes, they've got a phone. I mean, so I think I get this much better. But it really, to me, just begs the question, and I'm glad the Chief, you're here to answer. We basically, as a council, decided we were going to spend $150,000 additional dollars, on this effort. Should this $150,000 be another officer?
We're currently, we recently met with Rebecca and her staff, in fact, yesterday, and we're discussing other options and other ways to possibly do this. But we're respecting the council's approach to maybe do the other program as a pilot. We respect that. But we're meeting with Rebecca and her staff to come up with other options for you to consider the next time this is on the agenda. No chief is ever going to tell you he doesn't want more bodies. Of course, I would take a police officer. But I think there are other ways to do it as well. And I think we need to go that way and see what else we can do to make this better. I think there's a variety of options. What's difficult, when we do have other officers out there, is that at times we have to pull them off to do something else. Chuck and his team and the others in the blue shirts, they are dedicated to that. And we like having it that way. So the long and the short of it is we're meeting with Rebecca next week and her staff, with the Browning Allen and Victor Garza and my staff, and we're going to put some other options to bring to you to help you make a decision the direction that you would like us to go.
Well, that'll be helpful. And I want to personally know what you are recommending that we do with this $150,000. And I don't necessarily... I think that what happened last week is that you have a lot of different opinions up here. So I think this gives you an opportunity to say what you think about this, separate from what the council direction is, because I don't think there is a clear council direction. I'd like to know professionally what you think we ought to be doing with this. And we're talking specifically in the context of another officer on State Street. Now, I know I have great confidence in Greg Hans and what he's doing, and I know there's already been a difference in what he's doing on the street. And so there may be something where we're getting benefits from what's just changed, between 6 months ago, the tactical effort, and in the 500 block, and now. But I personally would like us to go over do overinvest in this problem, and find that a year from now that we don't need to be spending as much on this, and can adjust at that point in time. But that's my personal bias on this. I know other council members think that we ought to have more officers on State Street as well, but that maybe we're going to get to that place in a more roundabout fashion. But
Mr. White and then Ms.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One question that I forgot to ask is, we're two persons down in the yellow shirt department. With Cabrillo Boulevard's leg is not staffed at this point. Can you talk to us a little bit about that staffing on an ongoing basis? Is it a challenge to keep people there? And are they difficult to recruit? Perhaps those would be two questions. And then also, of course, what would be your assessment of why, if this is an ongoing problem of any seriousness? I mean, I'm thinking about another one that we've talked about in the past has been dispatchers, of just being, gosh, we just have trouble keeping that piece of the team fully staffed. Okay, well, is this another piece that we're having trouble keeping fully staffed?
Well, Councilmember White, if I could just go back to one of your questions about how many times they call the police, because it's just an anecdotal look at the week August 23rd to August 29th, there were 6 calls for service by our yellow shirts to the police department for calls for service of things that they observed. So you could take that and probably extrapolate it out and average between 4 to 6 times a week they're calling the police. In terms of the yellow shirts and hiring them, community service liaisons, it's a part-time position, and that draws a wide variety of people into the testing process. We're pretty selective of who we hire to represent the police department and the city, so they have to pass a background check as well. They have it's a job that is, since it's part-time, it doesn't pay benefits. So in answer to your question, is it difficult to find, hire, and keep them? Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. It's an ebb and flow. Currently, we've had our 4 community service liaisons for some time. We also, field the 2 blue shirts, and it's difficult to find those with the specialties of that. While it's a fairly well-paying job, oftentimes they move on to other things. It's oftentimes an area where someone's looking for a job to move on to something else, like being a police officer. So we can find them. We do. We're currently staffing 4. When one is gone, we're always in the hunt to replace them with the right fit person, to serve the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Maria?
Councilmember White asked my question. Thank you. About how the hiring and retaining. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
When the program was developed, was it modeled after any other agency's function? And was it created specifically for Santa Barbara, or did we look at other communities and say, what are they doing with a non-sworn supplement to their police force?
I couldn't answer that in any detail because I wasn't a part of the creation of this program, but it is something that was an addition to the police department for its restorative policing. In other words, it was something that they don't work directly with an administrative function for restorative policing, but more as when I use the term eyes and ears, it's not really the eyes and ears of the police department, it's the eyes and ears of restorative policing primarily. Yes, they have a function where they're high visibility, they can give directions, they can talk to tourists, but remember, they came out of a creation of the restorative policing program to assist restorative policing in identifying nuisance and problem issues for officers, the 2 officers that work with restorative policing and with the restorative outreach specialists who have more of an administrative function. So, when it was created, it was seen as a benefit. It is a benefit to the restorative policing program, but it also does have the side benefit of the visibility aspect, and to some degree provide a deterrence to some of the nuisance and crime issues.
Good. Thank you. Good answer.
I can add to that since I brought these folks on, I will answer more that this was our idea in Santa Barbara. In fact, there are 5 cities in the state and 2 out-of-state cities who have come to visit us because they're going to this type of an approach as well. My idea for this approach, especially with the homeless mentally ill, specifically the mentally ill dual diagnosed folks who were frightened by the blue suit. We were getting very little cooperation. There was very little. There were a lot of resistance. There was a lot of resistance to assistance because of the trust factor with the police officer in the blue uniform. I could put that same officer out of uniform like Keld and Craig, and the next day with the same person, and would be much more effective. So we felt that if we were to employ 20-hour folks the way we do to help Craig and Officer Hove in approaching these individuals who are in dire need of assistance for mental illness, we thought it would be more effective. And it's all relative because it's relative to the types of crimes, the calls for service. So we felt that the approach, the softer approach with the same programs attached to it would be much more beneficial for the program, the businesses, but more specifically for the clients that are out in the street. That's why I went to that part of the program. And we've got Ventura doing it now. Seattle is starting to hire. Seattle PD came down and visited us, and they've gone up and started to hire. I don't know if they call them yellow shirts or what they call them, and they're doing the same thing based on the Santa Barbara model.
And that's how I remember it too, Chief. And that's thanks for reminding me that we were talking primarily about restorative policing at that time and enhancing those efforts because it's been a successful program in town. So thank you.
Okay, I think we exhausted the slide, so you can continue on with your presentation.
Well,
thank you very much.
We appreciate it. I'm going to bring up Captain Altavilla now for his piece of this presentation. He's already here.
Madam Mayor, members of council, good afternoon. Alex Altavilla, captain with the Investigative Division. I wanted to go ahead and brief you on some changes that we've actually had in the Detective Bureau as far as staffing is concerned. We currently have a career development process where officers or detectives that come to my division stay for 5 years and then they rotate back out to other assignments. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Detective Rashawn Drayton and Detective John Ingram for their time that they spent in the Crimes Against Property Unit, and also take the opportunity to welcome Detective John Thompson and Detective Heather Clark also to that unit, which is overseen and led by Sergeant Joe Beecher. And then I'd also like to welcome Officer Adrian Gutierrez to the division, and the chief at a later point will discuss a little bit more about Officer Gutierrez's role. Along with all the good work that the investigation division does following up on patrol investigations, there's a lot of times that we end up going to jury trials that take a tremendous amount of work. And I'd like to go ahead and highlight two of those. On November 7th of this year, Raul Yescas, age 20, of Goleta was arrested in connection with 2 forcible rapes in the downtown corridor. The first rape occurred in December of 2010 in City Lot 10, and the second rape occurred on April 14th of 2011 in a Paseo Nuevo restroom. In August of this year, a Santa Barbara jury found Yescas guilty of both rapes, and he has not yet been sentenced. However, his exposure is 30 years to life. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Detective Charlie Casapis, who took the lead on that investigation. I sat in for good portions of the jury trial, and it was very well done by Detective Casapis and also the DA's office. The second trial that we had, again, unfortunately, was a rape that occurred March 30th of 2012, where Jerry Boneham was arrested for rape. He would meet young girls, get them drunk, and then go ahead and rape them once they were passed out. The rapes were serial and predatory in nature, and there were 6+ alleged victims in this case, some which were fearful to come forward and testify in court. In July of this year, he was found guilty of raping 2 women by an unconscious intoxication, and he is yet to be sentenced, which will occur it's currently scheduled for October 1st, and he's got an exposure of 8 to 22 years. And again, another great job by Detective Brian Larson this time. I again sat in for large portions of the trial, and along with Brian in the DA's office, again, another successful conclusion. Some of the other cases that we have that I think were significant to talk about that highlight some of the things we've done in the division. One occurred in August. This was a abduction of a 6-month-old from Santa Barbara following a domestic violence incident. The suspect, Joshua Martinez, stated that he was going to go ahead and kill himself and his daughter. The investigation indicated that the suspect was traveling down to Mexico and probably en route to cross the Mexican border. The patrol did a really good job. Investigation Division got involved, and we issued an Amber Alert. And with the assistance of the Department of Justice and the San Diego Police Department, the suspect was arrested without incident, and the child was actually released unharmed at down around the San Ysidro border. This is an interesting one because it goes to the deep relationships we have with DOJ and the San Diego Police Department on actually mobilizing a lot of the resources across the county lines. And this was something where it was actually interesting to watch on live TV, their SWAT team call out the suspect and him merely just hand over the baby. It was a great ending to something that could have been very, very tragic. The other case that we had that I thought was very well done was in July. We had Juan Romero, age 30, and Gambino Romero, age 26. They were both arrested for rape of a homeless woman at knife point down along the beachfront. They were cousins, and they were assaulting a 62-year-old homeless woman on East Beach. And that ended up actually resulting in a very successful conclusion as far as the arrest of both of them. And then you can see from the picture up there on the right of the slide, we also have Detective Dan Taglis, who is assigned to our SaberNet task force, narcotics task force. And in August, Dan received information that there was a Los Angeles-based narcotics ring that was basically supplying Santa Barbara with large quantities of cocaine. Dan was able to go ahead and put together and execute a search warrant in Los Angeles at the business, and as a result, you can see they ended up with a seizure of 5 kilos of cocaine and 2 arrests out of that. And as the deputy chief said, and the chief, burglaries right now in all categories are relatively low. We're actually in pretty good shape. I think, quite frankly, we probably have a lot of the right people in jail. However, we can do better. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and give a public service announcement, because the ones that we're seeing is burglary, theft from auto. And typically what is happening now is the suspects are doing what we would call smash and grabs. They look inside the vehicle for property inside, whether it's a cell phone, a laptop, or a purse, or whatever it may be. They're merely smashing the window and grabbing the property and leaving. What this does is it leaves, obviously, the victim, in this case from our community, with a broken window. It also leaves them with their property stolen. But typically in these cases, there's little or no physical evidence for law enforcement to follow up on. So from a public service perspective, we would like to encourage the public to, number one, if you don't have to, don't leave property at all in plain view inside your vehicle. If you have to have it and you have it with you, go ahead and put it in the trunk. Worst case scenario, if you got it with you and you haven't got a trunk, then somehow cover it up in the bottom floor somewhere. But that would definitely help to mitigate these crimes of opportunity that we're seeing with burglary, theft from auto.
Captain Altavilla, is it in residential areas, cars parked outside of people's homes, or is it downtown?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, there isn't any kind of real pattern. We've seen a lot of them at trailheads in some respects, where, or even, quite frankly, sometimes at gyms, where these suspects may be watching people come in, know that in these venues they're going to be out of their vehicles and away for an extended period of time, and they've got a little bit of time to kind of navigate and commit their crimes. Thanks.
Captain Torres is going to talk about staffing and hiring, and I also have Lieutenant Flagenham to assist in another part of what Captain Torres is going to be presenting.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Captain Torres. of the Administrative Division of the Police Department here. We're doing pretty well on our hiring front. We currently have one vacancy in the police officer position. However, October 20th, we will be hiring 5 new officers for the October Academy, and that'll put us 4 overhired in anticipation because we see a couple retirements coming up before the end of the year, as well as 2 possible lateral transfers. So we're going to be losing probably 4 officers by the end of the year. So we'll be at full staffing. Also, this Friday, we are beginning our next testing process for the April Academy. And I anticipate our attrition rate, we probably lose about, we probably hire about 7 to 8 officers a year. And we hire biannually. We do the testing process. We work with HR to stay on top of it. The authorized overhiring really puts us in good position to always keep us at full staffing. So that's a really good tool for us. In the area of PEOs, that's parking enforcement officers, we're down a couple positions there. We have 3 people in background for that position. We've already completed the testing process, so it's going to, that'll be filled shortly. And in the area of dispatcher vacancies, we have 7 vacancies, and we currently have 7 dispatchers in background. 5 of them are in the process right now being signed off, and a couple more they'll be finished pretty soon. So we're hoping to hire those 7 that we have the vacancies for. And as you well know, we're finalizing our little move-in process for our new center. I'm going to have Lieutenant Legging to kind of give you a little quick update on what's going on with that.
Madam Mayor, members of council, on September 8th, the 911 center was moved over to the Granada Garage. That has been in various stages for several years now, and so we're pretty excited the opportunity to move. Construction began in the facility in late March, and it was finalized or practically finalized on September 8th. Our facility moved on that day. We shut off all our 911 lines and transferred them over to the Sheriff's Department, and we had dispatchers working out with the Sheriff's Department and had our dispatching system with them on laptop. And so there was no interruption in our ability to take and dispatch calls. And on the move day, we had already pre-prepared for 3 positions for radio. So we essentially had dispatchers accepting calls out of the Sheriff's Department, dispatchers dispatching calls from the new facility, and dispatchers packing up and walking out the door from the old facility. So when we finished that day, it was about 12 hours. We managed to get everything done, and the facility's up and running. We currently are just tightening up some of the work that was not completed, cosmetic issues, some other AC units that need to be done. But with the amount of integration, the amount of coordination that needed to happen in order to get this done, it really took about 6 months, weekly integration meetings. And I would say my hat off to Eric Maple from Public Works. He was the project manager during my tenure, as well as Josh Hagmark, who worked on this project before him. And then Alan Goldman out of the electronic maintenance section or facilities. His crew did an amazing job as well. So we will spruce it up, put some pictures on the walls and make it nice, and we'll have a formal event probably in the next month or so.
Great. Mr. Hart has a question.
Yes.
Well, I just want to congratulate you on that. I know that logistically that's really a challenge to pull that off. But going back to Captain Torres's staffing and hiring slide, there's not a table in there for folks that are on leave and injuries and things like that. Can you tell me more about that, the status of that, Gil? Just where we're at with that. I think that Captain Whittam told us last week that we've got back 8 of the 16 folks that were out. Is that right? I just want to make sure I've got my numbers right in my head.
I'll have Captain Whittam.
Captain Whittam's going to address the injuries on duty.
Okay. Sorry to make you move there, Lieutenant Flair.
Councilmember Hart, that's correct. Currently, We have 10 under IOD status or others but that's in the patrol division. I wasn't sure if your question was specifically for the dispatch center or administrative services.
I was thinking of patrol.
For patrol. So I have the numbers. We keep update it weekly, and currently we have as patrol staffing, I believe it's 49 in our team strength, and that's the number I typically look at for putting the officers out in the street is our team strength numbers. Anytime we're around 50 or above, or 49, we're doing to where we can adequately police the city without what I call cannibalizing our specialty units and bringing, say, the motors, the TPFs in to backfill those. So right now we don't have to do that.
Okay, so just to back it up so I really understand this. We had this big dip where an extraordinary, irregular number of folks were out on leave or injury. And we have gotten back half of those folks to the point now where you're not having to play whack-a-mole and move people around from the different tactical things, that you've got the right number of people in patrol?
Councilmember Hart, I look at it like this. In my tenure and 2.5 years of overseeing and commanding the patrol division, I've had from 4 officers that were IOD and other up to 16. So that's the range that I've had in the 2.5 years. And so when I'm anywhere in between there and about the halfway point, that's where I can adequately patrol our staff, our team staffing. That's about where we are right now, about half there. I believe we have 10 that are IOD and other. I think at the high we're at 16, so I have 6 persons back. It's that when we dip below 48 is when I start seriously looking at cannibalizing our specialties and bringing those folks in just to backfill on a temporary basis. And currently, we don't have to do that because we have adequate staffing to cover our minimum staffing numbers for patrol teams.
Okay, because I'll just be clear and transparent with where I'm going with this, is that my perception is that the ability to have regular foot patrols on State Street has been compromised by this unique period in time when we had so many folks unavailable for whatever reasons, and that has led people to think that isn't, there's no sustainable model for having foot patrol officers on State Street. And I guess what I'm hearing, and maybe it's just because what I want to hear, is that that's not the case. That you can commit to having a beat officer on State Street, and that yes, when there is a crime that requires people to go and respond to that, that's the caveat that's always going to be in place. But that the confidence level of being able to staff foot patrol on State Street has increased significantly as these folks have come back from leave. Am I representing that accurately?
I believe you are, and one of the reasons is that you gave us an add-on officer position in July 1st. So there's one additional resource that we have to staff that. I have high confidence at this point that State Street will have its 2 foot beat officers indefinitely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, one of the other sort of holes has been the need to staff the dispatch center, and that's been done with safety personnel. Is that happening now at the compromised level of dispatch staff?
Councilmember White, yes, but what we try to do is those folks that are out on injury, say the sworn ones, we backfill some of those. So currently I do have 1 officer that's pulled off to fill that, but the others I'm filling with those that are out on injury as in a temporary duty status or a modified duty status, backfilling those.
It's a halfway back kind of use there, and that's a good one.
Yes.
And then, my other question, did you want to say something, Mr. Sanchez?
I just wanted to share that the captains have gone to their teams and taken people from patrol, from detectives. Officer Hans went down there recently for quite a while and dispatched. So it's really a collaborative. We know what's important. I mean, there's really one of the most important things that we do is dispatch. I mean, it's the first connection to the community. That's where the calls come in. Without adequate staffing in the dispatch center, it becomes a critical issue. And we've had either officers who are injured that can come back, modified duty, have work down there. Completely healthy folks like Officer Hans and other, Kristen Shamradola has left her detective desk to go down there for a month to dispatch. No complaints. We know what's important, and we have to be flexible. That's the key word for us, is to be flexible. We've been able to do that. The issue with dispatchers, as in police officers and other positions, again, are backgrounds. We have people in backgrounds, and we get a lot of people who test. We'll probably have over 200, maybe 300 people this week at our police officer testing, and we'll probably only hire 6 to 7. So, and many of those dispatchers, as police officer candidates, we lose them at the background, and we have to start all over. And we're not unique to any other department. We're currently doing a study of our entire operations of dispatchers, retention, hiring, retention, training, supervision, and we're in the middle of that study right now where we've hired a firm to come and look under the hood, if you will, of everything dispatch, because it is such a critical thing that we do. So that's where we are with that.
Well, and I certainly appreciate that. And it's obviously if we can't clone Officer Hans to both be in dispatch and on State Street at the same time. So we're just, and at least in my time here, it seems like the dispatch has been, and also what I've heard, at least at even at the fire department, is that the dispatch is a difficult position to fill and to keep filled, and that seems to have been the case during the years that I've been here. That's just it's just one of the places that's been difficult. So I'll look forward to hearing what that study produces in terms of suggestions. And then my last question is, where does the 2 empty yellow shirt positions fit in on this chart? Is that on this chart, or would that be on some other document?
Councilmember White, no, that this deals with full-time positions, and
I see.
So those are part-time positions, so they're not covered in this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, keep going.
The police activities league is going strong. Great picture there of the kids at the teen center. The summer was very successful. We have listed, I won't read them all to you, you have them in front of you. We have a list of partners for this last year, and it's just been really a great year for our youth. They've had a great time, most of it at no cost to them or their families, and we're really excited to be able to continue to provide services with Pell. The summer programs are really important. We've got Jim up there. Jim, we really appreciated Jim visiting our kids at the camp. Several of us went up there to see the kids. This was our leadership camp up at Camp Whittier, where Jim is in that picture, and the kids are just awesome. They're interested in going to college and making choices like that, and it was a wonderful time for them, again, at no cost to them. The summer programs, the teen center, cops and kids, and so on. We had, over 650 youth participate this summer. That's pretty outstanding, and again, at no cost to them. And then we continue to transport them. We have the vans. Nancy's really good at helping us with transportation. It is a clear collaborative in the city in terms of what we want to provide our youth, and the Police Activities League is just one of those great programs that we continue to support and be a great part of. But the kids, it's all about the kids, and next year in the summer, if you would visit these kids, they would really appreciate it, and we added Jim there because we really appreciate him being there this year with the kids. In terms of our Citizens Academy, we continue to do 2 in English, 2 in Spanish. This year, we're about to venture off and do 1 in both languages at the same time. We had the funds in our budget to purchase some equipment, receivers and headsets and transmitters, to have interpreters in the room and do this together. And my philosophy or my idea behind this, and really the purpose, was to bring different communities together from the city in one place to discuss the same issues that we hear on the west side, downtown, east side, San Roque, the Mesa, and bring these people together, even if they speak different languages, to discuss policing in Santa Barbara at the same time. So that's going to happen in the next few months, and we're really excited about that. I wanted to share something that Captain Altavilla briefly stated about the GREAT program. We've just started a 1-year pilot program, the keyword being pilot program. There's a GREAT program around the country that the Department of Justice sponsors, and it's called the GREAT program. It's Gang Resistance Education and Training. It is a curriculum that is taught in the elementary schools and the junior highs that addresses violence, addresses bullying, addresses citizenship, staying in school, respecting your elders, respecting your teachers, and looking forward to a great educational experience in their life so that they can make great life choices after that. This was started a few years ago all over the country. I met with Dr. Cash and ran this by him. We discussed it. It didn't take long to convince him that this would be a great idea to get to the elementary school kids, 4th and 5th graders, immediately to discuss these issues before they get into the junior high. This is at no cost to the city. The Department of Justice provides all the curriculum, all the books, everything. All I have to do is provide the officer. So what I've done is I've taken Officer Gutierrez from his beat coordinator position, although he's still going to be doing the Spanish language radio show and helping with Pell, to teach this course at the elementary school level beginning in October. It is a pilot program, so we're not doing all of the elementary schools. We're going to do 7 this year, 4 in the fall and 3 in the spring. And then we're going to meet with Dr. Cash and his staff, and we're going to be evaluating it as we go, including meeting with the teachers and principals to see if they would like to continue this program. Again, no charge to the city, no charge to the school district, except for the instructor who is Officer Gutierrez for us. So we're really excited about it. There's a family component to this, which is really unique. It's much more than the DARE program. The DARE program was 17 weeks long. This is 8 weeks, 8 days, I should say, during the week, where they really talk about making great choices at a very young age. Last year and the year before, as I mentioned before to you, going to some of the elementary schools and seeing the bullying in front of me, seeing graffiti on their notebooks, seeing penciled tattoos saying certain things that shouldn't be on there. So we just need to get to these kids early to give them other options to maybe not do that, because once they're in the junior high and high school, it's tough. So my thought was, if we can get into the grade program, and if Dr. Cash agreed to allow us to go into his schools, we thought a one-year pilot program would really give us an indication if this is the right thing to continue doing. We're not in the school in the junior highs because it would take 2 officers. I don't have a second officer to do this. So the pilot program will only be in the 7 of the elementary schools this year. The schools were selected by Dr. Cash's staff, not by us, and we're starting in October. Officer Gutierrez has already met with parents and teachers and principals and some of the students in preparation for this program called GREAT. So I wanted to share that with you today. In May, around the country, we celebrate, or we acknowledge, and we do the police officer memorial programs all around the country. Every year, we do acknowledge in the Gary Awards, Tom Gary, who's at the bottom right. That's why we have the Gary Awards in Santa Barbara County. It's a great event. Many of you, if not all of you, have been there. But this year, we wanted to do something special. I have Sergeant Harwood here, who's going to be working on a project to acknowledge not just Tom, but the other 4 prior police officers who died in the line of duty in the history of this department, and that's who they are. And what we're going to be doing, and I have a person who's going to be assisting in funding a small but nice and classy memorial wall for those 5, and hopefully we'll never ever add a 6. And we're going to make that happen hopefully by May, and I wanted to share that with you. That is our presentation, and we're all ready for some questions from you if you have any additionals.
Thank you. And why don't we go to Sharon Byrne? She's been patiently waiting. And thank you for your patience, and you have your speaker slip up, so come on up.
It was absolutely fascinating. I'm glad I got a chance to hear all of it. I wanted to mention that about a year ago, when we started looking at forming a business improvement district for Milpas in the east side, one of the things we did was we met with the Hollywood Merchants Patrol. We had them come up and spend the day with us. And we looked at possibly providing a merchants patrol on our nickel for the Milpas area, and we decided against it, and I'll tell you why. Because there was a policing program in place in Milpas that was working really well. And it was a combination of Captain Whittam and Sergeant Holtke from Tactical Patrol side of the house We were having monthly meetings with them through the Milpas Action Task Force. So we were having an opportunity there to, work on hot spots and crises areas. At the same time, we started the Milpas Outreach Project, and we had Officer Ho from Restorative Policing on that team. So we were having a lot of dialogue there around the homeless. Officer Gutierrez and Officer Wojo both live in the Eastside neighborhood and were assigned as Eastside beat cops. And I cannot tell you how invaluable that is, that having people based in the community that have an amazing amount of intel and know so much about what goes on, and they know everyone in the community, it was incredibly effective. And having the community policing substation on the east side also really helped calm a big problem at the East Side Park. Finally, we had 2 community service liaisons, Pablo and Memo, who also live in the Milpas East Side area and who were very invested in seeing that be an improved area. So with that combo of police force right there was really, really effective and covered all the bases. I'm sorry to say we lost. I think we lost them, the beat cops, maybe as much as a month ago. Adrian, as you've heard, is going on to be great. Adrian is great. He doesn't even have to try, and I think he will do beautifully in the role that he's going to. He's perfect for this. But Adrian is the best beat cop that ever lived. I wish you guys had a factory somewhere where you could stamp those out, because they just don't make them like that. Wojo is right up there with him, and I think we lost Wojo to Powell. So effectively, we lost our beat cop presence, and we didn't know it until we referred people to them, and they let us know that they were no longer our beat cops. So I'm kind of sad about that, and I would love to find out what's going to be the plan for community policing, because it is something that is working superbly well on the east side, and it is a great way for the police to connect with the community and be part of it. And I think it really works. The other thing I want to say is thank you, Captain Whittam and Sergeant Holke. They ripped out a pretty nasty prostitution and meth ring that was operating at the Nopalitos post office area, and has just, I think the business owners came out and cried and then hugged them when they saw the busts being made. So just want to thank you guys very much for that.
Okay, thank you very much. That closed the public comment portion. Mr. Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, who will be taking over Officer Gutierrez's beat coordinator position?
We're not going to replace Adrian until after January. Wojo is retiring in December, and who can replace Wojo? I sent him to Pell temporarily. They lost their executive director, and they have a big event coming up, so I needed someone to grab a hold of that. Sure. So I sent him there. This week, if not Monday, we're going to put the flyer out for a replacement for Wojo's position that will go back to the east side, and I don't know who that's going to be because we haven't put out the flyer yet. We just Sergeant Harwood and I are finalizing that tomorrow. So we're going to replace Wojo. In terms of Officer Gutierrez, we have not decided yet, but good news is we have 2 officers graduating from the academy later this month. So we're getting there. We're going to get back to the 4, but we're going to get, hopefully in the next few weeks, Wojo's replacement as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to supplement what Captain Altavilla said, not only is asking for trouble when you're at a gym or a trailhead, surfing is another really bad deal because you leave your car. It's usually easy to break into. I had a friend at state line or county line down by L.A. and Ventura. They got everything in his car, and he was lucky. The Santa Monica cops that night rolled up on 2 guys in a car. Thought they looked a little suspicious. Sure enough, they had everything in it, but and they got it all back. But they said 15 seconds is about what it takes. So be that as a warning to all of us, I guess. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I'm not quite sure it's really a police issue, but it may be, or maybe something that I need to ask the city attorney about, is the food trucks that we see along Milpas and sometimes other places. Do we have any jurisdiction? Can we do anything about those?
I'll defer to my attorney.
We can within a pretty narrowly circumscribed set of limits based on vehicle code and case law. So, yes, there is something we can do. The something is pretty narrow. I'd be happy to report back if the council wants to ask me to do that.
Well, I would, and I don't know if anybody else will join me, because I've heard complaints of increasing numbers of food trucks parked outside restaurants, and it seems like unfair competition in a sense. So I certainly would like to hear something back if I could. Thank you.
White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to ask about the cleaning up the homeless encampments. There was a surge there for a while, and can you report to us what your current situation is and when what's your rhythm on that issue?
Councilmember White, there was a time where we had an issue, and it was kind of a legal issue where we weren't cleaning up the camps. And we've resolved that. We worked through that. We've had coordination with county and with Caltrans, so we're back on a regular track. In fact, it's an objective within our P3 measure to do 12 cleanups a year. We're beyond that with our P3 measure with 16. So that's where we met. Where we ended up at the end of July was with 16, even though we had a gap in there where we weren't doing them for a while. So we're on those. When they're needed, we schedule them, but we have a goal to do 12 of them a year.
There wasn't one, I mean, you had a surge there for a while, and that was obviously very effective. And so we can expect another one before you're back for your next meeting, or what would be the...
Well, I won't promise that, because many times, in fact, every time, it really depends on the county workers that we get. And if we get some available, we'll jump right on it and utilize them for that. That's the top priority, and Public Works knows that. And they've done a great job of getting us folks. And as they get enough people to go do this is when we're going to jump all over that opportunity. We're hoping that before the end of the year, but we don't really know.
And so it's county workers that
there is a name for them, and SWAP. Yeah.
SWAP. Okay. Well, we'll see if we can't lobby for more swappers. Great, thank you.
Mr. Hart?
I understand that there is an active problem encampment on the Lower West Side. And I thought, when we had talked about this previously, that we were not going to have swap workers be the kind of limiting factor for this effort, that we were going to, if we had to, hire private contractors and everything. So I hope we all talk amongst each other and figure that out. I don't want to have something go like that for 4 months when I'm hearing folks say there's an active problem right now on the Lower West Side with an encampment. So. And apparently it's an urban travelers encampment, which is kind of key to the State Street problems.
If you can give us the exact location, our TPF folks every morning at 4 a.m. are out there.
Good.
And every day at 4 o'clock in the morning, we're out there, and I've been out there with them. But I don't think it's an issue right now, but if you have an exact location, we'll jump on it. And that does not mean we have to work for the swap workers. We need to go out there because we go and warn. We give warnings. We tell them we're coming. We don't go in there and commandeer the place. These are human beings, and we give them an opportunity to take their property and move on, and that's really the best way to do it. But so far, no issues as far as we know.
Okay. The other thing that I've heard about the food trucks is, and it may be more of an enforcement thing, I'm not sure, is trash, and patio furniture on the sidewalk. It seems like there might be another way short of regulating food trucks with a blanket brush, through the city attorney's office and that kind of approach. Are there tools about putting plastic furniture out on the sidewalk, doing, litter abatement kind of things? I mean, is there a way that you can frankly, what I think it is that there's some bad operators that are going to mess up this for everybody, because I think there are huge gradations of professionalism with the food truck operations. And I think some of the folks know exactly how to do this right and have no impact. And there's other folks, I think, who are, probably operating on the margins financially and are just not being good operators. So it'd be great, from my perspective, if there's anything you can do to get after those folks who are the bad operators, that would be a more effective way to do this than a big, regulatory effort about food trucks in general.
Well, I'll give that to the beat coordinators, and we'll work on that. I know that many times, as in Fiesta and 4th of July, we get a lot of vendors from Los Angeles and other locations that show up. The ones that we have seen and had the most problems with have not been local food truck operators. They've been from out of the city, in fact, out of the county, who show up and park in certain locations. I know that's a fact. But I'll have that looked into, and I'll get back to all of you on that.
Great. Thank you.
Well, that was a very thorough report. complete with a lot of questions from us. So thank you very much for the update. And we don't have it. We just need to hear it. So there's no motion here. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any council member committee assignment reports?
Thank you.
Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, at the regular meeting, Downtown Parking Committee on September 11th, the main topic was, surprise, surprise, the State Street Corridor Program as proposed to be administered by downtown parking staff. And what was mentioned was the council's request to bring back more other agency information at the next meeting.
Ms. Maria?
Thank you very much. I attended the city's County Affordable Housing Task Force last week, and it's a great place to be on top of all the projects that are going on the ground, many in Goleta. And one thing to report, though, is that we decided to invite City College and UC Santa Barbara to be part of that group talking about housing. One, because City College is being pressured to provide housing, and UCSB, I try to stay on top of what they do, and I'm always surprised at what UCSB is doing. So, and there can be some synergy there with UCSB and City College. And then I was at the Youth Council last night, and you haven't tooted your horn, Mayor Schneider, for helping them promote their anti-bullying, project. And you are involved with something related to, you'll tell us later, your mayor's group or something. So the young people are really, it's a new school year, and they're focused on that, and they're doing the Day of Caring as well on Saturday. Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last Wednesday, the mayor and I participated in the presentation of the infrastructure roadshow to the city advisory boards, and so we had another run of that, and we're started with publicizing that, and there's a whole host of those meetings scheduled here for the next month or 5 weeks or so.
And those will be open to the public, and I think it's all on the website. We're finalizing those dates, so it's a good 20-minute presentation and then another good half-hour plus of conversation with whomever's in the room. So and that's and Mr. Rouse will be part of that as well as part of the subcommittee. To answer Councilmember Murillo's question, U.S. Conference of Mayors is working with cities across the nation about using October, which is Bullying Awareness Month, to coordinate some activities within the city on anti-bullying efforts. And so the logical nexus for this was to work with the Youth Council. And so we're finalizing details of when and what time. And there's a movie that is out called Bully that will be showed. And this is something I know the Youth Council was working on anyway as a topic. So it's nice to match those two efforts together. So thank you for bringing that up. Saturday was the third annual Family and Health Fair. It happened at Bonet Park from 10 to 2, and I just really want to thank Mark Alvarado and from the city, but also it was a great partnership between the city, the county, the school district, 50-plus organizations, either tables, informational tables outside, and a full health screening inside at the Westside Boys and Girls Club gymnasium. We're getting the data now, but I'm hearing close to 300 individuals got some form of health-related screening. A lot of it are those who may have diabetes and don't know it, and there's follow-up, and the Prometores, which is a program with the public health and with the public health department, is working on reaching out and doing follow-up case management. So we'll get those details, but this is something that's been in our budget in the last couple of years, a minor budgetary item for major impact. So it was a great event and hot. Thank goodness for tents outside for the 50-plus organizations having their information. So, but really, I really want to thank Mark Alvarado in particular for this on the city's effort of making all this work. So with that, we do have some closed sessions you need to read.
Item 15, conference with labor negotiator. Item 16, conference with city attorney regarding pending litigation entitled Frank Benalis, Sebastian Aldana Jr., Jacqueline Inda, Cruzito Herrera Cruz, and Benjamin Chaveras versus the City of Santa Barbara et al., Santa Barbara Superior Court Case number 1468167, and item 17, conference with City Attorney regarding anticipated litigation.
Okay, and we will adjourn from closed session. Thank you.